to Backpacker Radio, presented by The Trek, brought to you by Topo Athletic. I am your co-host, Zach Badger Davis. Sitting to my right is...
Hi, I'm Juliana Chaunce, a.k.a. Chaunce.
Reminders, we are in New York right now. New York City, to be exact. Are you having fun?
I'm having a great time.
Yeah.
It smells like home.
Yeah. So we're not actually in New York. We're in Golden. But as of the release of this episode, we are in New York. So if you listen to this on release day, one, good on you for doing so. And two, we're going to be romping around. Does New York have a cool nickname?
The Big Apple.
I mean the state.
Oh. The Bigger Apple.
Is there
the
anything?
Empire State.
Is it the Empire State?
I think it is the Empire State.
Okay, we're romping around the Empire State for the better part of a week and a half. Chaunce will be there even longer, doing cool New York stuff. So plenty more New York content coming your way. We're thinking about maybe doing a Patreon impromptu. I guess it's not impromptu if we're planning it, but a Patreon recording from a train on our ride from New York City to Albany. So
yes,
that'll be a fun debrief of the hiker meetup. The hiker meetup is happening today as of release day. We're going to hit capacity. I think we're at like 140 something right now, and they gave us 150 slots. So
which is incredible.
It's going to be chaotic.
Yeah.
Thanks to everyone who is coming, came, whatever tense you want to go with. Thanks to everyone who came.
Yeah. Thanks for coming.
Polly, please slice that. Also, if you guys want even more Backpacker Radio content, consider supporting us on Patreon. We have got a lot of fun stuff in the pipeline for this. We're going to rope a future guest. I guess we're tipping it now. John Z is going to be in the podcast coming up here shortly. We've got a fun one with both Lieutenant Cuckoo and Viking. We'll be doing some Patreon content with them as well. As I mentioned, we'll probably do something. We'll definitely do something in New York. Not totally sure on whether that'll be in a train or in someone's tent or what's going to happen. But
probably just whenever it's too embarrassing to put on actual internet, we'll probably give it to Patreon.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, a lot of Patreon stuff. Again, if you guys enjoy the podcast, we greatly appreciate the support. And also we're making efforts to get some fun exclusive content for y'all. Last but not least is the link live.
For
the last reminder that I've got here.
Oh, I was down by the question of the day. Yes, it can be. At any time is what the email from Rachel said.
Let's save it because that's a quick turnaround. Let's give ourselves a few more days. We'll just tease it right now. We've mentioned this in the last couple of episodes, but Denver friends, mark your calendars for December 7th. We've got a fun one in the books for you. I promise by the next episode, we'll have all of the details to spill.
She says we're basically set up to get a link up.
Yeah, but
all right.
As we've learned with this in the past, fuckery can and will happen, so yes. I don't want to promise a link and then not deliver. So
no links for you guys.
Yeah, we'll have it for the next episode. But yeah, I think that's it. Let's get right to today's panel interview, whatever you want to call it. This was a fun one, another one from PCT Trail Days with our good pals, Hannah Goodman and Abby Evans.
We are joined by today's guests. This is a AT to PCT panel. We got a couple of AT thru-hikers and a PCT .185 thru-hiker as well. We'll get to the bottom of that in a second. But we're joined by Hannah Spring Goodman and Abby Evans, a.k.a. Shitwater Fireball, queer of the Salamanders. Well, it says in the notes. I wasn't sure if there was an update there. Did you update it?
Queer is great.
Okay. Is that a typo or did you update it?
No, I updated it.
Okay. I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought this was a typo.
Oh, I mean,
okay.
Yeah.
That would be an aggressive typo from Rachel.
Yeah, that's why I was like, exactly. Maybe just say the name it's supposed to be.
Spring and Shitwater are both 2024 PCT hikers and AT alumni. Spring hiked the AT in 2021 and blogs for the Trek. Similarly, Shitwater hiked the AT last year while being a trail correspondent and also writes for the Trek. Thank you both for joining us here on Backpacker Radio.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
Let's talk about, I guess we'll do individual intros. Let's start there. Spring, how did you get into the outdoors?
Well, I grew up in Massachusetts, and when I was 12 years old, I went on a backpacking trip to the Grand Canyon with my mom. And as soon as we got to the bottom of the Grand Canyon, I knew I loved backpacking. And so after that, we started going to the White Mountains and doing day hikes and overnight hikes there. And then I met my first thru-hiker on one of those trips. And when he told me that he had hiked there from Georgia, I instantly knew I wanted to do that. So that's how I got into the AT. And then the PCT was the obvious next choice.
Sure. What was the gap between your learning of the AT and hiking it?
I learned about the AT when I was maybe 14 years old,
Okay.
and then I hiked it when I was 18.
Yeah. Hell yeah. You were 18? Damn, I didn't realize
Yeah.
you were so young. That's crazy. And Shitwater, you've been on the podcast before. I forget, what was the context of your last, this was at AT Trail Days, we're just doing rapid fires, is that
Yeah,
what it was? Okay.
Pretty much.
So familiar voice, especially if anyone listens to Trail Correspondence, but let's go over the intro again, which I'm sure will be redundant for some people, but how did you get into the outdoors?
So in college, I lived near the Appalachian Trail. I went to Virginia Tech, so it was 30 minutes away. And some of my friends on the last weekend before graduation, we were all like, oh, let's go for a backpacking trip instead of just getting like really drunk downtown. And I was like, okay, that sounds fun. And I'd always like loved the outdoors as a kid. Whenever I went hiking, I didn't want to turn around and I just want to keep going. And so we all went out to do the Virginia Triple Crown Loop, and it was awesome. Like, I was completely inexperienced, so I just brought a pack and filled it with cans of soup because I thought that's just what you ate in the wilderness. And it was around probably 40 or 50 pounds. And my friends, instead of doing it in 3 days like we agreed, sped in front of me and we did it in 2 days. So my knees were destroyed by all my soup. And it rained the whole time in regular AT fashion, but all these like little red F's started coming out, and it made me remember just like how much I loved being outside and all the silly little amphibians. And I was just like, whoa, like even though I'm in immense pain and really struggling and like crying down this Tinker Cliffs like descent, I'm like, actually this is one of the happiest moments of my life, and I want to keep doing this and maybe be silly goofy and walk from Georgia to Maine.
Yeah. I want to get into the trail names stories here, but for those, because I don't know if we've talked about this before, what is the Triple Crown Loop? Tinker Cliffs?
McAfee's Knob and
Dragon's Tooth?
Dragon's Tooth, yeah.
You can make a loop out of that?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, obviously all three of those are on the AT, but what's the trail that loops it back?
There's one that just connects from Dragon's Tooth, and I think it loops you back to Tinker's Cliffs to Dragon's Tooth, and it loops you through those, and you can just kind of, it's like a 35-mile loop that you can do.
Sweet.
There was an ultra running club at Virginia Tech, and we used to just like do the 35-mile loop later on. Yeah, that was silly.
Yeah. Okay, trail names. I'm almost positive we did this last time, but I'm going to pretend like nobody heard that. What's the background on the array of trail names?
Shitwater comes from my unfortunate experiences and learning curve with using a bidet, and I would get shitwater all over the privies on the AT when I was first learning how to use it, which I don't do anymore. I would never do that. But yeah, it was pretty gross. And I actually asked my friends if shitwater or piss water was worse, and they were like, yeah, shitwater is really bad. That's nasty. So then Fireball is because I almost set all my gear on fire on the AT, and then I just settled for a life of cold soaking and sadness. And then Queen of the Salamanders, or Queer of the Salamanders, is just because I love salamanders and would always tend to find them because I'd always be like trying to make the swelling in my feet go down and just soaking them in like streams and stuff. And then all these little salamanders would poke up. They would always make me really happy.
They come to you.
They do.
And your town shirt hoodie is way too fitting for that.
Yeah. And I also have a red F tattoo too.
Yeah. Do you go by Shitwater simply on the PCT?
Yeah.
You've just narrowed it down?
Yeah, I got tired, and everyone would be like, you can't have a trail name that's that long.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, okay. And then Shitwater it is.
Yeah. And what's the story behind spring?
I did a section hike before I thru-hiked the AT, and it was on spring break, senior year of high school. And I was sitting in this meadow eating lunch, and it was in March, so there's tons of thru-hikers starting. I did it at starting at Springer Mountain. And all the thru-hikers were going by, and they were like, "Are you thru-hiking? Are you thru-hiking?" And I kept going, "No, I'm on spring break. I'm on spring break." And so they named me Spring Break, and then it got shortened to Spring. But yeah, my full name is Spring Break, but my friends call me Spring.
Love that. So you did the AT as a leap year then, yeah?
Yeah, a gap year after high school, yeah.
Would you recommend that to other folks who might be considering a break between high school and college?
Yeah,
Assuming they wanna do
100%.
college,
Yeah, I think it gave me the time before college to find myself and grow, and that's super important for everyone after high school.
Yeah. How do you think it informed any like big decisions that you made prior to going away to school?
I think it just gave me the ability to know myself and know what I wanted in life, and yeah.
Was it difficult to convince your parents to be on board with the idea?
I had gone on other solo backpacking trips when I was in high school, so they were already used to the idea.
Yeah.
My dad made me take self-defense classes
Yeah.
before I did it, and then he also bought me a Garmin InReach.
Yeah.
So yeah, after that they were like, "Okay, I guess you're gonna go do this."
Yeah. That's badass to do solo backpacking trips in high school. What inspired that?
I didn't have any friends who wanted to go hiking.
Yeah, don't let that slow you down.
Yeah.
How long of trips were you doing?
Not super long. They were mostly on in the White Mountains or on the Long Trail.
Yeah.
So just a couple night backpacking trips by myself. Yeah.
And what were those experiences like? Were you terrified when you're setting out? Are you excited?
The first one was on the Long Trail. I think it was 3 nights, and I was terrified the first night. I cried like the entire night because I thought a bear was going to come eat me.
Yeah.
But after doing it a couple times, I got totally comfortable.
Yeah. Sweet. That's super badass to be doing solo backpacking trips in high school. I can't imagine ever having that kind of confidence at that age.
No.
Okay. Well, I guess let's also touch on your guys' PCT experience. So Spring, you just finished.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
How does it feel to be done?
It feels amazing. I'm happy it's over.
Yeah. And how much of the trail did you see? Because I know this has been a really challenging year with fires on the PCT.
Yeah.
Every year is, but it seems like this one is maybe harder than recent years.
Yeah, I think I missed, I haven't counted it up, but I missed probably around 300 miles.
Yeah.
I had to skip in NorCal around the Shelley fire, and then I skipped from Crater Lake to Shelter Cove because there was a fire there, and then I had to skip the fires in northern Washington.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll get to how that felt later in this episode. And Shitwater, you are where?
I'm in Bend.
You're in Bend. Okay. So not too far south of Cascade Locks, which is where we're recording. And what's the mile mark for Bend?
Bend is around 2,000.
2,000. Okay.
But I also had to skip from Chester to Shasta because the park fire and the smoke was absurd. And then Crater Lake too.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't think I really introduced this part at the top, but we're going to be doing a panel on going from hiking the AT to the PCT. So it's probably relevant for Chaunce and I to introduce our AT and PCT experience, as we'll be weighing in on these subjects as well. But I hiked the AT in 2011 drink, and PCT southbound. AT was northbound. PCT southbound in 2017.
Yeah, I've got the only opposite perspective. I did the PCT first. So I did that in 2017, and then I did the AT in 2019.
Yeah, I guess it won't necessarily be the order of operations, just comparing the two. We'll go with that.
Cool. So I don't have to leave?
You can stay.
Okay.
Okay, so where do we start here? Let's just go. This is kind of a broad subject. I'm sure there'll be a lot of criteria for this, but let's just talk about overall difficulty of the two trails. In your guys' experience, which one was more difficult?
I think the PCT was more difficult for me. The AT doesn't have the water crossings, the snow in the Sierra, and the fire closures. So, like, logistically, I think that the PCT was harder.
I feel like they're just different. Like, I'd say the AT was really hard trail-wise, like, actually physically, like, just really grueling miles, and you're also kind of going insane after a while because you're just kind of like in the green tunnel. But then on this trail I realized how much I liked that, but that's different. And it was more, I agree, it was more simple in terms of like going to town, and you didn't have to worry about like these massive logistics. Like when people would say like, oh, the logistics on the PCT are really hard, I'm like, oh, it just might be like, you know, I guess skipping's hard and whatever. And I didn't realize how hard it was until I was like sitting in a grocery store in Chester and there was an active evacuation order. And I was just like, oh my God, like I have to get out of here right now. And I have no ride and no real connections. And I just feel screwed. And so I feel like the PCT is more difficult, like mentally like that with logistics. The actual trail is like really chill and it's very nice and very well maintained.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I'm a fan of the like, oh my God, I have to get out of here right now because everything's on fire.
Yeah. Fire closures are common on the PCT. That experience is not. I think that's a little bit more unique. How did you manage that?
I cried in the grocery store. But essentially, I just hiked 5 miles out into the park fire at first because, like not into the fire, but into where the smoke was starting because it didn't look that bad from the trailhead and the trail wasn't closed. So I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to hike out and see how it goes. And I had an N95 with me. So I was like, okay, if the smoke gets really bad, then I'll just put this on. And so like literally 5 minutes within walking, I'm like, oh, time to put on the N95. And it just keeps on getting a little bit worse and a little bit worse. And now like the trees, behind the trees is getting kind of orange. And I'm like, oh, this doesn't look really normal. And I'm hiking with my friend Necktie, and Necktie's in front of me. And I'm like, you've hiked a lot of the PCT before. Have you ever hiked in something like this? And he's like, oh no, this is horrible. I've never seen anything like this.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, no.
I have to imagine hiking in an N95 sucks.
It's really rough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have trouble breathing without exercising.
Yeah. I just really try to practice mindfulness exercises.
Yeah.
Like, you know what? I just pretend I'm a pair of eyeballs that's like drifting through the forest and like that I'm not attached to my breathing or my body at all. Therapists might call that a dissociation disorder, but
Whatever works.
I call it thriving in the woods. But yeah, so I started hiking out like that, and we got 5 miles into that, and then the smoke got too bad, and then I started to like have an asthma attack and having trouble breathing, and I was like, okay, this is dumb. Like, I'm just gonna turn around and figure things out. So I turned around, got back to the trailhead, got back to the cursed grocery store in Chester, and then they 2 hours later they closed the trail. And when I was walking back is when I like took the photos of the huge smoke plumes that were just like towering over the trail, and that did not look like that when I set out. Otherwise there's no way I would set out on that trail.
Yeah.
It looked insane. So then basically Necktie was just like, okay, well, I'm going to go to Colorado and get my bike. I was like, okay, cool, man.
Yeah.
I'm going to figure out how to get around this fire because I don't have a bike out here. And so then I just, mainly I find just letting other hikers know that you're struggling and letting them know, like, I don't really know what's going on here, and I've never dealt with this before, in which a lot of the times you'll be met with a lot of hikers that are like, oh, I also don't know what's going on, and I'm really stressed too.
Yeah.
And so I wound up running into my friend Chef, and she invited me to come in this Trail Angels van, and that's how I wound up in Bernie at 11 p.m. at the church. And then woke up in Bernie, saw the smoke was still really bad outside, and then just looked like I was ready to go and sat at a table just eating some Reese's Puffs, and then a trail angel came up and was just like, do you want to ride to Shasta? I was like, yeah. And so then wound up in Shasta, and Shasta was more clear. So I was like, okay, this feels good. I'm going to hike out from here.
Yeah. More clear, but still pretty smoky.
A little bit hazy. It felt like the longer you waited, the worse it got.
Yeah.
So I tried to book it out of Shasta as quickly as I could. And then I didn't hit rough smoke again until getting into Oregon. And then that's when it started to get worse. And I definitely had a bit of a crisis because I was like, oh my God, like if the rest of the trail is going to be smoky like this, like with my asthma, I'm not going to be able to breathe to finish this hike. So then I just started hiking in an N95 like 24/7 and sleeping in it.
Whoa, yeah.
That sucked because like the AQI would be 150 and my friends would be like, oh, like we still feel fine. And I'm like, my lungs are really tight.
Yeah.
And I've been wheezing.
Yeah.
So I just hiked as much as I could and got to Crater Lake, and then it was okay. And it got better. Like Crater Lake wasn't okay, but once I skipped Crater Lake to Shelter Cove, like 50 miles outside of Shelter Cove, it started to clear up a bit.
Did you notice the smoke intensifying your asthma, or were you in the N95 enough that it was okay?
The smoke definitely made my asthma worse
Yeah.
as I was hiking. And so it would be like, I could tell. It was funny because I joked that I was like the canary of the group now, because it's like, oh, when I start wheezing, you know, the AQI is getting worse. So that was rough. But the N95 did help a bit.
Yeah. Because I think, what is it, a AQI over 100 is unsafe for people with breathing conditions or something to the effect.
Exactly.
Which asthma is.
Yep.
So yeah, that's a tough place to be. Did you ever consider getting off because of that, or just?
Yeah, definitely, 100%. I started like bawling my eyes out in Oregon because I was like, oh my God, like the rest of my trail might be over. Because if all of the rest of the trail is smoky like this, like I don't want to further endanger the future of my breathing. So I considered getting off, but then realized the N95 helped a bit when I was hiking. And it's weird because it starts to fall into a similar category of like other trail difficulties. It's like, okay, in the desert you had the extreme heat and the water sources really far apart, and in the Sierras you had the really high altitude and like weird freak thunder and hailstorms. And now it's like, okay, well,
poisonous air.
Yeah, the trail's flat, but now I can't breathe.
Yeah. Yeah, that is tough. Do you recall what year Necktie had hiked the PCT previously?
2017, I think.
Okay.
That's Piers.
Yeah.
Oh shit, I forgot that was.
Best guest.
He didn't experience smoke.
Yeah, I mean, he also was struggling.
Yeah.
With like breathing, because like where we were hiking out in Chester, the AQI was literally like 400 or 500.
Yeah, but you had mentioned that he said he didn't. Maybe I guess what you're saying is he didn't experience smoke as bad.
Yeah.
Okay, because I feel like 17 was the first year, at least since I started paying attention to the world of thru hiking, where the fires were even a consideration. Like it felt like a novel thing for the PCT.
Oh wow.
And then since then, it's been more years than not that's been the case.
Yeah. Yeah, this year's been crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, Chaunce, we'll get your
Yes.
experience.
Also hard to choose. It depends on when you say what's more difficult, like in what way you mean difficult. Because trail-wise and tread-wise, I'm trying to hold in a sneeze. Oh, God. Hold on, I have to sneeze, but it's tickling my nose. Oh, okay. Trail-wise and tread-wise, the AT for me was like there were points where I would just look at the trail and be like, what the fuck? Like, it's going up that. And that was very challenging because it was, like, full-body hiking. Stuff where you're going straight up and down versus the PCT, which is obviously created for horses. So it's a much kinder trail in terms of, like, the grade and the tread and all of that. But with the PCT, I had the difficulty of the first hike learning curve, which made the desert very painful. I think the different types of places you go through on the PCT makes it hard. Like going through desert as a ginger, I don't thrive in extreme heat, and that was terrible for me. I had to flip past the Sierra, which goes into the logistics being more difficult. And I think mindset is more difficult to keep on the PCT because it's so hard to get back into a groove when you've missed miles and are pulled out of that. This is, a through hike type of mindset. It becomes very hard to motivate yourself to want to get back in the swing of things and not just like call everything a wash. So on the AT, I think even though the trail itself is, I think, much harder in terms of the grade and all that, I think it's easier to stay in a good mindset because you don't have to face the logistic hurdles that make maintaining good mentality super hard. So both are very difficult, but both in different ways.
Yeah. Obviously there's a lot of different categories to consider, but if I'm just pinpointing one, and this is just my perspective, and I think a lot of it has to do with it being the first hike, but the AT for me was significantly more difficult. And I had to deal with fire closures on the PCT, but it was never anything that was tough. Like the solution always just fell into place. People were offering hitches. Maybe some of that was because Tom knows everybody, Jabba knows everybody. And I don't know if some of our hitches were his connections or not. I don't actually recall. But I feel like all of the impromptu logistics to figure out were very easy problems to solve. And like just in general in thru hiking, I feel like that's usually how it works out. Like spontaneity and serendipity always come to the surface in those situations. But yeah, the AT, I think the answer is going to be whichever one is your first hike is more likely to be the more difficult one, just because you have so many mistakes to make. And unless you do backpacking trips prior to either of these hikes, there's just a lot of fuck ups and things you have to figure out on your own. And I got that mostly out of my system on the AT. Therefore, the PCT was easier. And yeah, just to reiterate what you guys said, the trail itself is objectively just far easier. Like I never did a 30-mile day on the AT, and we had like a 45-day stretch where we were averaging 30 miles per day on the PCT, which I didn't even think was possible. So, but yeah, there's definitely like we sent probably a dozen mail drops on the PCT. That's not something that you have to do at all in the AT. You can, but I don't recommend it. So it took more logistic preparation for sure. But yeah, if I just had to pinpoint which trail was easier for me personally, I would say the PCT. Since we've talked so much about smoke and skipping with fires and all that stuff, I want to talk about the mentality and difficulty that has existed for you in terms of starting with the AT. I think you're just indoctrinated into this culture of like a pure thru hike. Like I think everyone lives by a similar standard of like just do every mile possible, and every mile is possible in the AT. Like you don't see some people will yellow blaze. I was around it a little bit, but it's not. It doesn't exist the way that it does on the PCT out of necessity. Therefore, you carry that frame of mind into the PCT, and it's just going to come to a head at some point. And almost every year on the PCT. So I want to get your perspective on how that shifted your perception of your hike once you encountered the first skip.
Yeah. I started pretty early on the PCT. I started March 22nd. And so when I got to the Sierra, there was still a good amount of snow there. And yeah, coming from the AT, I was determined to not skip anything and get every step. And so I went through the whole Sierra and through the snow, which was still a pretty big issue when I went through. And I really had to push myself to not skip any part of the Sierra since a lot of the people around me were skipping. And so then I made it through and I got to NorCal and there was the Shelley fire and there was no choice but to skip around it. You know, some people were road walking and then the PCTA asked people not to do that. And so that wasn't an option. And so me and the two other people I was hiking with ended up taking a bus around it. And I think I just had to let go of that idea of hiking every single step like I had on the AT. And it definitely took a couple weeks for me to come to terms with it. Luckily, the fire had started, I think we were like 10 days out when the trail closed there. And so I had a lot of time to process before I even got to that point of skipping. And I think, you just have to let go of that mentality. I think coming into the trail, I knew there was going to be fires. And so that helped, knowing it was going to happen ahead of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always really interesting to me to see people who pay attention to the PCT culture, have hiked the AT, and then come into the PCT still with the mindset like I'm definitely road walking the entire thing. Like, you can't be sure of what it feels like until you're in the situation. So yeah.
For me, it was really rough because I went into it not expecting a continuous footpath. I anticipated that things are going to get messed up by fires. But when I came into the trail, I was still hiking with my partner, love child, and the first fire that I had to skip happened maybe a week after I broke up with them. So I was just like, okay, not only am I navigating solo hiking again for the first time since I solo hiked 700 miles on my own on the AT and then finished the rest with him. It's like, okay, now I'm also navigating like these huge logistical barriers I'd never have on a thru hike, and also trying to find more friends in a trail family when I had just moved on from all of our old trail family and him. And it was just like, oh my God, okay, full of strangers now. And my social battery is tanked because I'm going through a breakup. And also everything's on fire.
It's when your outsides match your insides.
So I was just like, okay, I'm just gonna go with the flow. So I agree with Chaunce in the fact that like when you skip miles, it makes it so hard to keep that mentality of a through like in your head. Because after the first skip, I started hiking again in Shasta, and it just felt completely different. I was like, I didn't walk here, and like, you see the rocks that make the mileage markers on the side of trails, and it's just like, I didn't really do those miles. Like, even though it was like only 100 miles or so at that point, it was just like, yeah, but now every time I look at those, I just have to subtract what I didn't do. And then it's also the fact that it's like the forests are burning at a rate that's not sustainable for them to continue to thrive like they used to, largely due to climate change and all that jazz. And so it's just like also really emotionally jarring when you're walking through like another burn scar after like I'm currently choking on smoke from a new fire, and it's a burn scar from a couple of years ago. And it's just like realizing, oh my God, like this is all really rough. And just your mentality suffers because of that. And I found it easier on the AT to keep going because it's just like, oh, well, I walked here, I'm going to keep walking. Mm-hmm. But the PCT started to feel like, oh, like this is just a weird road trip with strangers where I bounce to new sections of trail, and now it just feels like a bunch of random backpacking trips that are all pretty cool, but all kind of exhausting to coordinate together in a summer.
Yeah. No, it is an interesting feeling. It's like being on a really strict diet and then all of a sudden binging on Oreos. It just makes it easier to then chip away at make another mistake with your diet. I mean, I guess there's 1,000 analogies like that. I'm sure like somebody who is an alcoholic that has been sober for a certain period of time and then falls off the horse probably makes it easier to fall off again in the future. But just it unleashes dark thoughts that probably coming from the AT you never had to confront.
Yeah, I came closer to quitting on this trail than I ever had on the AT. And just so many points of being like, why am I out here? Yeah. Like, what am I doing?
Yeah, the mile markers are a mind fuck.
Yeah.
Like, I was going through after I skipped the Sierra and like tearing out loose leaf paper and writing what I actually had and like doing that math at each one, and it takes away the celebration of accomplishing something. Like they should be there so that you're like, oh, I accomplished this next 100. I accomplished this next 100. And instead it's just like a reminder of like, pull out the pen and paper, do some mental math. Like how much is your number actually? And instead of you feeling great when you get to them, it's just like a reminder of like, I still feel like shit. Yeah. And it's so hard to get back into the groove of hiking. And it's different when you like, cause I missed miles because of fires, and I also missed miles because I skipped the Sierra. And like ultimately looking back, retrospect, glad I skipped the Sierra. We know that. Enjoyed the way I did the JMT, had a much better time doing it in a month that I loved. But in the moment, like we flipped north to Belden, and that 13-mile climb out of Belden, I think that's how long the climb is. It took 3 days to get up because I got halfway up. I had just bought new sneakers that I was going to try the Sierra with. So I had these new boots. I fell into a river, like not like a scary river, just like literally walk across these rocks, and I just slipped. So I got the shoes wet, stopped to set up camp, made a fire to dry off the shoes, ended up burning the entire top half off. And I just set up my tent and sat in it for 3 days. Like it rained, and I was like, I'm not fucking hiking in the rain. Like I'm not going to do it. And I just sat there and ate Oreos out of my pack and like moped until I was ready to be like, all right, it's time to keep going, you know? And the fire part was hard too, because I stopped being able to afford to hike at the pace that I wanted to hike, because we were right ahead of the fires due to having skipped. We were far enough ahead where the fires that kept starting were just behind us. And so we were hiking through the ash, and we were hiking through like just like smoke falling on us, and like you'd sit and you'd be able to wipe the little ash things on your legs, which was crazy. Everything's orange. And you know, if I don't do a 30 today, I'm going to have to get off trail because the closures are going to catch up to me. When you're hiking that close in front of them, and then you're going through these towns to resupply that you would love to take a 0 in, and you can't, because if you take a 0, then you might miss more trail, because then the closure might come up to where you are. And so it's just day after day of 30 after 30 after 30 after 30, and you have no say in it. And like it feels like you're not changing your hike to hike with someone else's pace. You're not changing your hike for anything that you could go and be like, actually, I don't want to do that. I'm going to make my own choices. You're literally changing your hike so that you can keep hiking. And it just feels like you're rushing through spots you don't want to. And that sucks too mentally. So there's just like 2 different kinds of mental suck. And yeah, it's something that you don't experience on the AT. I was flying high the first half of the AT. It was like the best shape I'd ever been in. And in my mind, I was like, this is fantastic. There's nothing logistically I need to worry about. There's nothing scary in terms of like, am I going to run out of water in a desert? Am I going to go into snow that's going to kill me? Am I going to find a river crossing that I'm going to get swept away by? There's none of that here. You know, I was loving it. But yeah, I think there's a lot more mental weight tied to the weather and that stuff on the PCT that there's no way to really know about it or how it's going to affect you until you see what kind of hand you're dealt for the season.
I was one of those dummies that carried the idea that I was going to do a continuous footpath, regardless of like what sections were closed by fire. I was going to find the road walk alternate. And I remember the first closure that we encountered, I think, was at Mount Jefferson Wilderness, again, hiking southbound. Jabba and I were like trying to think of ways to make it fun for ourselves. Like we were going to see if we could find someone to slack pack us and we'd run it and like try to make some fun content out of it. Ultimately, we decided against it just because we saw the majority of people were just skipping it. And I think the PCTA had recommended people skip it because it was not a conducive road walk. And for a couple of days, I was beating myself up about like tarnishing the purity of the hike. And it wasn't until we were actually in the hitch on the road that would have been the road walk that we were going to do that I felt at peace with the decision, because it was a very windy road with no shoulder, 40 miles per hour. Like, seeing what the road walk would have been was very comforting to me, because it was terrible. Like, it would have been unsafe. It would have been boring. It just would have sucked in every capacity. And it was just like a reminder to me, like, this is not what I'm out here for. Like, that would have been the antithesis of the experience that I wanted. So yeah, in terms of like mourning the purity of the hike, the anticipation of skipping the miles for me was way worse than actually skipping the miles. Like, taking the hitch, it was actually kind of therapeutic for me, being like, yeah, this is not what I signed up for.
Yeah, when I saw you guys at Timberline Lodge, you were not having a great time.
Yeah, we were at the height of like trying to figure out how
Job is just like in a chair, just like not talking, which is not usual.
Yeah, we really wanted to connect the footsteps, but yeah, once we started to skip the miles, it was like, oh yeah, I'm just out here for a good experience, and that road walk was not going to be a good experience. So yeah, I'm curious to know for you all, which was the hardest part, the anticipation of it, actually doing the skipping, or once you land back on trail after you've skipped miles?
I'd say for me, honestly, probably trying to get back on trail and finding people, because until this trail, I didn't realize how much of my hike kind of centered around how much I love people. And like, I just really love connecting with friends on trail and seeing friends on trail. And with the closures, I don't usually have an established trail family on trail. I usually bounce from trail family to trail family, because I love getting to know a bunch of people. But then when the closures happen, it's like, oh, now I won't see the friends behind me that I'm just like a couple days ahead, and I won't see the friends ahead of me that I'm just a couple days behind. Now I'm just like in this random bubble that I don't know anyone again. And it just feels like starting over every time with like new friends, which again, I love meeting people, but at the same time, it's nice to have a base of a community that you've created around yourself. And then it's just like, oh man, it's like moving to another town. Except totally. You're just like moving up a little bit on trail, but it just changes the people that you're surrounded by a ton. But then you see a familiar face and you're like, oh, nice. This is fine again.
Yeah. How do you go about scouting who's around you? Is that an Instagram thing? Is that far out comments? Is that just like encountering people on trail?
I just see them on trail. Yeah. Most of the time. Usually just when I'm hiking out, I'll just like randomly catch up with friends. I'm like, oh, thank God. Yeah. You guys are around. Great. Yeah.
I definitely think it was the anticipation of it for me. For the fire in Northern California, I spent days before that fire hiking towards it and thinking about how much I didn't want to skip around it. And then, of course, once we got around it, it was totally fine. I was still having fun and enjoying trail, and I was able to let go of the whole continuous footpath thing. I also think the anticipation of getting to Canada before there was any fires there was a really big thing for me, because there was a fire that started in Manning Park, and it wasn't super close to where the terminus is, but I still got really nervous as we were getting closer to it that we weren't going to be able to hike and actually touch it. And so me and my group kind of sped up in order to get to it just in case it closed. And the anticipation of the possibility of that also definitely, like, mentally was really difficult for me.
Yeah.
Oh, are you asking a follow-up?
No.
Oh,
you were about to say something.
Input. Yeah.
Go ahead.
For me, it's always the first resupply stretch after. For me, it was the Belden to, I don't remember where we stopped after that, but it was the Belden stretch. And with the fires, whenever we'd flip past something, like, I think that first resupply stretch of getting back into the groove, for me, is always the hardest part, just because you have to reset that mental focus into what the overall goal is.
Yeah. It's always interesting when you talk to somebody who has hiked the AT in recent years. They'll always downplay their hike and then like asterisks it with the miles that they missed, not realizing like this is something that everybody is confronting with. And like if you're able to, there are some people that are able to make a continuous footpath or not miss miles. They just get incredibly lucky. But like that's just the thing. You just got very lucky. Like you have very little control over the fire situation. And like this year, I think there were technically like 5 mega fires. Like that's outside of your control. There's nothing you can do about that. So it's interesting to me. I'll talk to somebody who hiked the trail, PCT, whatever, and be like, yeah, but I just did blah, blah, blah. It's like, stop. Like the things that are outside of your control, don't let that sully your experience of it. Like you're out here to have a great experience, and a fire happening outside of your control shouldn't take away from that.
That, what helped me with that when I was coping with missing the Sierra on the PCT, and that was something where, I mean, I didn't have to miss the Sierra, right? Like I could have gone in and done more of it. And so that was something where it was like, it wasn't miles I had to miss for a fire. It was miles I chose to miss. And what helped me start to be like, that's fine, was after the hike, I went back and I calculated how many miles were closed for fire closures that I got to do because we were ahead of things, because I had flipped. And I had this realization of the number of miles I missed from the Sierra is less than some of the thru-hikers had to miss for these fires. And they're technically able to be a thru-hiker because these were official trail closures, not choices to skip parts. But I've technically done more miles than some of them might have because I was able to get through those with the timing. And so realizing like, okay, I might have more miles from this year than someone else who gets the title. Why am I beating myself up about it? You know, like I got to do all these miles, and that helped me realize like, okay, it'll be fine, you know?
Is there like a PCTA definition of what a thru-hiker even is? Is it doing all of the non-fire closure miles? Because you say like an official thru-hiker.
Well,
I don't even know what that means.
that's what we settled on our year was, I mean, that's what like collectively the mindset was the year I did it, was that if it's an official trail closure and you have to miss the miles, then it doesn't count as not being a thru hike because the official trail doesn't include these. So you're still thru hiking the official trail. That was like the mindset of, you know, the people that are having to miss for the fires are still thru hiking, but because you choose to skip the Sierra, you are now lashing.
Yeah. It's just, I'm curious, because there's probably some faction of people that still to this day will hold that like if you didn't do a full continuous hike from Mexico to Canada, that you're not a thru hike. Like everyone has their own unique definition of what it is.
Yeah.
So,
well, there was a whole another one of those threads in the PCT 2024 Facebook page the other day.
People debating
some woman that
means.
was like, I don't know why people still insist on saying thru hike when da da da.
Yeah.
It was I don't remember. I was reading the comments and I was like, it's so dumb that we're still all hung up on this.
Yeah. I agree with that wholeheartedly. Okay. Is there anything else that you guys want to say on that subject?
I think, like, if you feel like you did a thru hike, then it should count as a thru hike to a certain extent, obviously. But that's kind of where I settled on after this hike was, okay, like, I did what I could and I had fun and I feel like I thru hiked, so I'm going to count it as a thru hike.
And it's not like you're getting an Olympic gold medal or something like that. It's like literally something that you feel about yourself. So if like you're just anointing yourself with a thing and you only did 5 miles of the trail, like you're just giving yourself false accolades, I guess, but it doesn't actually matter.
Well, you also realize when you get back how silly you sound to everyone that's not immediately in this like niche bubble.
Yeah.
Because when you go home and your friends are like, oh my God, like I can't believe you just hiked the PCT. And you're like, well, technically, and you're like putting an asterisk. Like there's so many conversations you have where you start to notice you're getting the same look from someone, which is like, I don't give a fuck that you had to miss 20 miles around. Like, what are you talking about? Like, that was still an incredible amount of miles. And you start to feel silly, like, adding that, like, yeah, but technically, because you, like, it just doesn't make sense. Like, for other people, it's like, well, you still kind of walked from Mexico to Canada, didn't you? And it's like, yeah, but.
Yeah, if you tell somebody that's not entrenched in this world and that you skipped miles because of a fire, they don't care.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's, I think, the correct response.
I try to think about it when I think about skipping sections of smoke and stuff. I think about explaining it to like my best friend Olivia from home, who's also super outdoorsy and stuff. And I think about like, okay, I'm about to try and hike through this potentially dangerous smoke that may harm the future of the condition of my lungs, but it's to get these 20 miles that are really important.
To somebody else.
That are really important, because if I don't hike them, maybe I'm not a real thru-hiker in the eyes of one of my friends. And then I'm just like, okay, but if I looked at one of my other thru-hiker friends, would I think they're not a thru-hiker for skipping these 20 miles for their own safety? And I'm like... No, I don't even care if they skipped the 20 miles because they just didn't want to walk.
Yeah,
like,
right.
Yeah.
They're a thru-hiker to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, the other thing, and I was forgetting this earlier, but I think it's also funny to bring up, is the other thing that I saw on my hike was, and again, it's different if it's a fire or if it's heavy snow, or, you know, there's just, it's different types of skips, I think, when you're told you can't versus when you choose not to. But there were so many people my year that were in the desert bubble with us that came from the AT. Like, you would just, like, you'd be able to pick them out and be like, oh, those guys did the AT. Oh, those guys did the AT. Like, you know, they did the AT because they never fucking shut up about the AT, you know? And we got to Lone Pine, where I had flipped from, and everyone was dead set on, we're doing the continuous footpath. And I was friends with a lot of them on social media, so I was seeing their posts, and one by one it would be like, I got to Whitney and then I got off trail, or I got to Bishop and then I got off trail. I'll do it another year. And we've talked about this on the podcast before. I think, like, waiting for an easier year and not working on a workaround, like, it's not really entirely possible. You're going to have to make logistical choices on this trail. And the biggest takeaway that you start to realize year after year after year is most of those people haven't gone back to actually, like, redo it. So would I rather skip a section and have to do all that and deal with this logistic burden that I didn't have to deal with on a different trail, or just end up not seeing most of the trail because I wait and life happens and I don't end up getting to come back, you know? So it's a wild time on the PCT.
Yeah. I guess since this is a AT PCT comparison, I know I've talked about this on the podcast a lot, but to keep this all in one place, I did I think like 40 miles of an aqua blaze on the AT. We were staying with a trail angel in Waynesboro, and he's like a big canoer, and he said that like once we got into the Shenandoah, he'd come, if like we hiked out to a side trail, he would have canoes ready for us, and we could do the first 40 miles of the Shenandoah section on a canoe. And since doing that, I've had some internet commentary about being like, I'm not a real thru-hiker or whatever. But it's funny for me, from my perspective, is like that never even factored into my decision making. Like, legitimately, I didn't know about the purism in general, certainly not the internet version of it, and that was much quieter back in 2011. But like for me, it was just, this sounds like a really fun adventure, and I'm out here for an adventure, and that was the full extent of the decision making. And I didn't technically skip any miles at all. Like, we did 40 miles of the Shenandoah, and then we got back to the horizontal part in the Shenandoah. To me, it was just like human powered miles from point A to point B. Yeah, I don't know where I'm going with this other than like, don't let somebody else make these decisions for you. Like, pursue the thing that feels right to you. And if you want to do every mile of the AT and like that's what a thru hike is for you, by all means do that. But like, don't let the peanut gallery be making these decisions for you, because like, yeah, at the end of the day, you're doing this for yourself. And I think thru hiking in general is just like a middle finger to what society wants you to do. Like, go sit in a cubicle, do this, do that, the other thing. Like, to go out and take time, 6 months to go walk in the woods is kind of giving a middle finger to that. And then to come back to the idea that somebody else is dictating how you do that thing is just so backwards to me. But yeah.
Yeah, I think like at the end of the day, you are the only person that's going to remember like the details of your hike 20, 30, 40 years from now. So why would you base any decision on someone that you'll probably not even keep in touch with a year from now?
It's a good rule for life is don't answer to other people for things like just
This is actually
use-
the life panel.
yeah.
We're here to tell you
Thru-hiking
about
is
life.
just a metaphor for life. Okay, switching categories. I think this one will be interesting because although we've only represented 2 years of the PCT amongst the four of us, I think we've probably had 4 very different experiences in terms of the social aspect of a thru hike. Spring, obviously, you were ahead, and it sounds like you were able to do more of Washington than maybe what is possible now. So yeah, I guess let's just start, Spring, comparing your social experience on the AT versus what you've had on the PCT.
Yeah. Both of the trails I started off solo. When I started the AT, I was more set on finding people to hike with. And I actually think on the PCT, it was easier for me to find people to hike with, which I don't think is a very common thing to happen. On the AT, I hiked like on and off with groups, but was mostly solo for the first 1,000 miles or so. And then when I was in Shenandoah, I finally found a group that I really liked. And our group just kept getting bigger and bigger throughout the rest of the trail until there was 7 of us, I think, who all summited Katahdin together. And then on the PCT, I came into the desert really stoked to be by myself and not really looking for anyone to hike with. And then on the 3rd day, right after Lake Moraine, Mount Laguna. Yeah, I think it was Mount Laguna. I met a bunch of people that I really liked, and then we all stayed in a hotel together. There was 7 of us who crammed into one hotel room in Julian, and after that, it felt like we were bonded. And so we stayed together for the rest of the desert. And throughout the Sierras, we all kind of split apart because some people didn't want to go through the snow and some people had weddings to get to and stuff. And it ended up being just me and then a couple from Finland. And so the 3 of us ended up hiking the rest of the trail together, which I was not expecting at all. And there was times where I would ask myself if I was really hiking my own hike. And so I would make an effort to make my own decisions and choose where I wanted to camp and everything. And we just kept ending up back with each other. We would want to hike the same miles and zero in the same places. And so that was really cool to see because I knew I was hiking the way I wanted to, and it happened to line up with the way that they wanted to be hiking as well. So I think I had a very social hike on both trails, and both I think were good balances of alone time and hiking with other people.
Yeah. It's always interesting to me when somebody isn't necessarily looking for that social connection and then just like you find it serendipitously. Yeah.
For me, it's been kind of a disaster. So I started both trails out solo. The AT, I loved it. I made a bunch of friends throughout the whole trail, honestly, and still keep in contact with a lot of them to this day. Like, they're all really close friends. And again, I did the same stuff I'm currently doing and would just kind of leapfrog around with different groups, different trail families. And like sometimes I'd hike with some people for like 400 or 300 miles, and then I'd move on and be like, all right, well, I'm going to keep going my own pace. And that was fun. And then I met Love Child around mile 700, and we hiked together for 1,500 miles after that. And that was really cool to hike with a partner. And that was a really amazing experience because it's just different when you're navigating trail with someone that you're also dating, because it's just like, wow, like this is the fast track to a relationship. Like, you literally know everything about me. You have watched me piss in front of you and cry and scream. And
that's just first base.
literally just face plant in the mud and just sob. So it's just like you get to know each other so well and form like such a strong bond, and it just lined up out there because we did similar mileage and we both pushed each other and really supported each other. That was really fun. And then on the PCT, we started out together, and my body is usually destroyed at the start of thru hikes. Like when I'm starting a thru hike, it does not look like I'm going to end the thru hike. Like my body gets fucked up. I develop plantar fasciitis. My Achilles seize up with chronic tendonitis, and my hips usually start to give out in some way, shape, or form. And I was also starting this hike with a broken shoulder. So
like a dislocated shoulder or
no,
clavicle or
it was
what?
a fracture
Whoa.
in my humerus. It was a small like little chip off of it that I let heal for 4 weeks, but I did start in a sling for like 2 weeks, so that was really cute.
It's dedication.
Yeah. And also I feel like the PCT was just more of love child's want than mine, and so we got out here and I kind of bitched my way through the desert and was like, this is stupid. There's no trees. This is dumb. This isn't the AT. I'm not having a good time. And then we get to Mammoth, and I realized like our relationship just isn't really what it used to be. And hiking with a partner isn't really what I want, because I can't make as many close, deep connections with people around me. And I realized that was half the reason I loved thru hiking, and that I just didn't want to devote all of my time and energy to a relationship while I hiked, and also that I wasn't really into men anymore. So then I was like, I broke up with him in Mammoth, but we still shared the same tent. So
It's one thing when you break up with someone and like you're still both on the lease and you have at least different like bedrooms to go to share a tent. That's next level. Tell me about that.
yeah, it was funny because we got through the Sierra without a bug bivy or anything, and that was the most atrocious mosquitoes I've experienced since New York on the AT, and those were really bad, and these were really bad. So while we're like going through the process of breaking up, we're also like just running from the mosquitoes and have these bug nets to sleep in, like only a bug net, while the mosquitoes are literally biting the rest of our body. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think things are working out. While we're like dying. And then we get to Mammoth, and then I'm like, hey, actually I'm gay. And then Necktie bursts in with a pizza and starts making a pizza because he doesn't realize we're breaking up. And I'm like, he's like, it's pizza time. And I'm like, we're just like crying. I'm like, okay. But the bug bivy was delivered to us in Mammoth.
Oh man, that's like a scene out of a movie or something like that. Like you guys are having this emotional moment, and then someone comes in with a pizza.
Yeah. So then we hiked together for the next week. While we're like broken up but still together. So that's really silly when we make new trail friends and we're like, they're like, oh, are you guys like dating? And we're like, no, we're actually breaking up. But we share a tent. But like obviously we're really good friends as well, because our relationship was just formed off of friendship from the AT. And so we had a lot of time to just discuss like everything we loved about our relationship, everything we didn't like, and so much time for closure when you're walking together still for like 100 miles.
Did either of you consider just like getting a cheap Bass Pro tent and just being like, I need a little space?
I literally thought about cutting the Tyvek in half and just leaving without a tent. But then I was like, no, we're almost to like Kennedy Meadows North. It's fine. And then we got there and I had my one person tent, and then we wound up just leapfrogging each other for the next next 2 weeks. And I also moved on from the trail family that we were both hiking with, so that also sucked, because it was just like, okay, cool, like I'm not just losing my partner, I'm also losing like all the close friends that I've had from the beginning of trail.
Yeah. How do you decide who gets the trail family in a divorce?
Who's faster?
Yeah, right.
He just sped up a bit faster than I was, and then realized he wanted friends and slowed down to hang out with our trail family because they were just a little bit ahead of us. And then this formed a kind of block in front of me. And then I was like, oh, cool. So I just like hiked alone for a couple days and was losing my mind. And I actually Garmin inReach messaged him. I was like,
You up?
yeah, literally. I was just like, hey, can you actually stay at the Donner's Ski Resort? Like, I think I have like some stuff to talk to you about. And then I got there and started talking to him again. And then I was just like, oh, actually, I remember why I broke up with you. Sorry.
Never mind, you can keep hiking.
You can keep going. And he was just kind of like, oh. It was like, whoopsie. But then the fires actually kind of solved all of that for me, because I skipped ahead, but he left a day or two before me. So I was just surprised 100 or 200 miles ahead of him, and he was just hiking through the smoke.
Yeah.
And he was like, I still have a continuous footpath. And I'm like, that's great. How are those lungs feeling?
Oh, that's funny. Do you feel like being on trail was a good place to process the breakup?
Oh, 100%. Like, I don't know. Before I started the trail, I kind of got the vibe that I would be finishing this alone. I wasn't sure, and I didn't want to think that, but it just kind of was in the back of my head, and I couldn't shake it. And then I got out here, and I was like, oh, it's time to shine, I guess. And then, like, just continued on my own. But it's been really great to process it out here. Because I think, unlike you, after I broke up with him, I really, really wanted a trail family, and I really wanted to hike around people. But of course, like, the trail's not going to give you what you want. It's going to give you what you need. And for me, it was just like, I had to figure out how to be on my own again. And I just realized, like, hiking alone, like, I just appreciated things a lot more. And I realized, like, we had spent a lot of time with him just, like, hiking behind me. And I didn't realize how much that made me feel, like, a little bit rushed, and, like, I couldn't just take my time and, like, do whatever I wanted. And then it was just like, wow, I can just, like, literally mosey around and listen to music, and just, like, if I want to stare at the sun through these trees for like an hour, I could just do that. That's fine. And it also made me more confident socially, and also more confident in, like, my gender identity too, because I was struggling with that for a while with him, because it's difficult to be non-binary in a heterosexual relationship. And so then when I was on my own more, I was just, like, actually introducing myself with, like, they, them pronouns, and, like, explaining to people, like, oh, well, it's, you know, I don't feel like a girl or a guy, and I don't really want to be either one. So I just like they, them, because it doesn't make me have a weird, like, gender crisis. But it's not that deep when you use she, her, but I just prefer they, them. It's just, like, misnaming someone. And so, and then I also realized, like, I just talked to myself a lot more, and I was just like, oh, like, I actually really missed my own company. Like, and I didn't realize how much of myself that I just wasn't walking with anymore when I was walking with him. And it was just like, it's not a bad thing or either of our faults. It's just when you enter into a partnership with someone, you're going to lose some parts of yourself that you didn't realize. And so I just spent, like, half a day talking to myself about what dip I really wanted to eat. And I was just like, you know what? These are the meaningful conversations I missed.
Yeah. No, that's good. I feel like there's a lot of people who struggle with solo time, solitude, and I think we'll just latch on to people on trail to avoid that circumstance. And not for everyone. I think some people genuinely do better in a group setting at most times, but sometimes it's good to have the rug just pulled out from underneath you to be exposed to that and to see how you respond to it.
It was needed. I definitely did spend a lot of time screaming and crying. Like, there's been so many scenarios on trail. Like, before I broke up with Love Child, I was, like, headed down from Cajon Pass, and I was just crying because of, like, pre-breakup relationship stuff that I was considering. And this lady is, like, coming up behind me, and I'm just, like, full on, like, scream sobbing lyrics to Big Thief songs that are, like, really depressing, and just, like, violently screaming. And she comes up behind me and she's like, hey. And I'm like, oh, hi. She's like, good morning. Are you okay? And I was just like, this is just how I wake up. I'm just waking up. Like, it was a part of my morning routine or something. Like, yeah, I always just scream sob to myself down mountains, you know. And then another time I was like scream sobbing as I was like walking along trail, and I didn't realize two girls were right on the side of trail just having a water break. So then my eyes are really swollen and puffy, and I walk by them, and they just kind of look at me like, oh, what's going on? And I was like, it's just one of those days. I just kept on like sprinting and sobbing the hiking by them. But I don't know, it's a good place to process, because sometimes my brain would just cycle through like, oh, let's think about all the happy memories you had with Love Child for like the next 3 hours. And I was like, I don't really want to do that. My brain's like, that's what you're going to do. Like, okay, cool. Yeah. So it just helps you to get through it. Yeah. But it doesn't mean it's easy.
Do you feel like you're in a peaceful place now on that front?
Yeah, definitely. Like, there's
Zach's like, are you okay?
Yeah. It's like, are you mentally well? And I'm like, that's a question I've been asking my whole life.
No, I mean, I think the trail, and specifically just having space, can be a really transformative experience. And
it
just
is.
Curious to know if...
Yeah, I think just one morning I just kind of woke up and I realized I just wasn't as sad anymore. And I think that just comes with space and distance. And I think skipping and being like apart from each other, like by at least 200 miles, really helped a lot, because now I'm not like leapfrogging my ex anymore. Which sounds like some sex thing, but it's actually a horrible thing to do on trail. But yeah, it's like, I feel a lot more at peace now, just with the knowledge that it's just like, oh, I can just make all these friends on trail, and it was more comforting to know that I can make a whole new community around myself, like even after going through something as jarring as a breakup. And it was like, it developed more confidence in myself, and also just the realization that like I am just more myself now. And I can mourn a relationship still, but also still be really confident and happy that I'm on my own.
Yeah. Somebody email us, podcast@thetrek.co, and let us know what leapfrogging your ex means to you. Chaunce.
Hi. So I have a social on both. I was a social girl. But they were kind of different. So the PCT being my first hike, I was totally loving like the social aspect of the desert. Like zeroing, pushing for a 00 every opportunity. You know, I wanted to go to the bars and do the fun things. And it was very much like a big part of the hike was like the party culture. And just like the fun of feeling like you're in college, and instead of having classes, you just have to walk. Like that was super cool. But it was also interesting because I don't thrive in group settings. Like I don't like making friends in a group. I feel like it's hard to do, and there's a lot of small talk, and I just don't love it. But I had started the trail with someone, and so I got to experience starting a trail with a friend, and how easy it was to make other friends when you can kind of let them do all the small talking and all that stuff, and you're just the one that's like with them. So I really didn't have any work in that aspect, which I don't know if I would have had the same super social desert experience if I was on my own, because I don't know if I would have like fallen into groups of friends so easily like I did when I was with her. And then when we did have a trail family, I guess because I didn't know anything else, it was my first trail, it was very hard to wrap my head around the idea of not staying with them. So a lot of that hike was me hiking at a pace that wasn't mine to keep up with people, because I just, like, not hiking with them put an unknown. It was like, well, then who do I hike with? Like, how long will I be on my own? How long until someone else comes? How long until I, like, will have a conversation with someone that will lead to a connection, that will lead to having new people to hike with? And what if I don't do that because I don't like small talk? And then, you know, you just like go down this mental spiral. So for me, the PCT, the desert part was super social. And then once you got to the Sierra, it started being something where that huge social bubble stopped because people were dispersing. They were either going in and trying it and then flipping, or going in, trying it and getting through, or flipping from the start. And if they were flipping from the start, where were they flipping to? Was it they were going to go to Tahoe and they were going to try to hike through the snow that was still there? Or were they going to Truckee and trying to hike through the snow that was still there? Or Belden or Quincy or Chester? Like, there were all these places that people would be flipping to. And so everyone that you had just met kind of dispersed. And so from that point on, it was very much, I want to stay with this group because I don't know anyone that's around me anymore. And on the AT, what was really cool was starting by myself. I didn't have a group. And I did find that it was hard in the beginning initially to make friends because I don't like small talk in like any situation. And so I'd see people on trail and I'd say hi, or I'd have my headphones in and I wouldn't want to talk to people. And I'd get to a shelter and there'd be like a big group there. And so I would just kind of quietly sit there and eat my stuff. Because like, how do you insert yourself into a conversation when a big group is already talking? And then made friends, which was great, and slowly formed a trail family, but felt like I was still going at the pace I wanted. And it was also interesting because there was that kind of like first hike party bubble on parts of the AT in the beginning, and I avoided it. I like didn't like it anymore because I was so focused on miles, having known what thru hiking is and not like currently having learned about it. And some of those people I ended up hiking with towards the end of the trail because paces changed. So the AT, I really would say I had two different groups I hiked with, and that kind of split in New York, where I stopped hiking with the like Shenandoah group and I started hiking with the New England group. And it was really cool to experience like two different chapters of the trail. Like if you were to sort it in trail families, it felt like two different hikes almost, with two different groups in two different atmospheres with two different bits of scenery. And it was really cool to be able to say, okay, like this pacing or whatever it is in New York isn't really fitting what I want right now. And I'm not scared of saying that and saying, okay, I'm just going to find a different group because now I know enough to know that that's possible. And some of the people from that second group I'm like the closest with, like coming to my wedding, I've been to theirs, stuff like that. Like went and like was on the hike where one of them proposed to his fiance. And I think I got a lot of the strongest connections out of that second group. And so what's interesting is I never would have found that if I was still in that mindset of needing to stick with the first group. But on the PCT, it's hard, I think, to be okay with that flexibility, because when everyone is flipping to different sections and they're flipping with people from the previous sections, whether it's around the fire or the snow or anything, like you're going to want to flip with people because it's easier to hitch with others. It's easier to get around things and like get a motel room with others. And what I found on the PCT was that like trail families were kind of like more closed off. And it's not because they're not like open to being friends and they're not nice people, but everyone is so focused on the logistics of what is my game plan to stay ahead of this fire, or what is my game plan to get around this fire or to get from here to here, that you have to start formulating an idea of this is what the next 100 miles is going to look like. Here's how I'm going to pace it. Here's the strategy. And on the AT, you don't have to strategize like that. So you don't have to. And like when you're on the PCT, you're choosing, okay, I like your strategy. I'm going to do that with you. Let's stick to this plan. And someone else comes and hikes up, and you're not just saying like, hey, you want to camp with us tomorrow night? You're saying, hey, we've already decided we're going to stay in this motel and do it this way and do this. And it just felt like the groups were so concrete that it would be much harder to just like flexibly leave and join different ones at that stage of the hike. So I think that was more challenging on the PCT than it was on the AT. But yeah, I think there's something nice to being able to, and that's a benefit of the AT, just being able to flexibly say, you know, I'm going to change my pace, and I know other people are going to come because it's such a busy trail, and it's easier doing that when it's not your first hike too.
I think my experience was pretty similar to yours, Spring. The AT, I was, especially early on, this is my first backpacking trip, so I was very nervous. So people were my safety net. Like, I really wanted a strong social community at the gate. And I started with a guy, and for the first probably month or so, we camped together every single night, like did everything together, lockstep. And then once I got comfortable in the backcountry, I guess as much as you want to call the AT the backcountry, on the trail, that started to dissolve for me very quickly. And it wasn't until I flew out to San Francisco for a job interview, and then I got broken up with my family because of that. I came back, and I was on the way back, I was nervous, but I think deep down I knew I was ready for a different social experience. And I think that's when I really started to get more value out of the AT. Was that was the thing that thrust me to be by myself. There's still people around, but because I wasn't with my group, I didn't know anyone. So I didn't feel like I had to conform to anybody else's schedule or feel like anyone had to conform to mine either. And from that point forward, really for the rest of the trail, I would hike in and out with other groups. Like, I would be around other groups, but I don't think I altered a single step in terms of like trying to pace my hike to somebody else. Like, I would move at the exact pace that I wanted to move at. And if there were other people around, I'd be social with them. Like, I liked almost everybody. There's a few exceptions, but like almost everybody that I met on trail, I really hit it off with and made good, strong friendships. But that was the point where like the social aspect was sort of secondary to me, as opposed to just like experiencing the trail at my own pace. PCT started off with Jabba, and we hiked most of the trail together-ish. Somewhere toward the middle, we got separated by a couple days. So we did the first probably couple 100 miles together, did the last couple 100 miles together, and then everything in the bulk of the middle, we were just in and out. But I don't know if we've talked about this on the podcast, but we definitely butt heads very much in the early days of this trail. The first 2 weeks, especially. At this point, we didn't really know each other that well. We had met at Outdoor Retailer a few years prior, had done some shorter hikes together. We did the bulk of the Colorado Trail together, but like the idea of setting out to do a multi-month hike together for two guys that are pretty independent and have their own ideas about how the way that things should go. It was definitely like there was trying to figuring out the pecking order, sort of like we would get in fights, and like the fights would come out of nothing. And I think it was shortly after that we just decided that like, okay, some days we'll camp together, some days we won't. But yeah, I think we just quickly figured out that we're really independent people, and hiking southbound specifically on the PCT allows you as much space as you want. Early on, the campsites can be pretty packed, but after basically Glacier Peak Wilderness, maybe a little bit past that, you don't really see a lot of people until you're crossing paths with the northbound bubble. Which is to say that if you want a solitude experience on the PCT, I definitely recommend going southbound, because you can hike with people, but it's sort of like an arranged marriage that you don't really get much of a choice of the people that you hike with. It's just the people that are proximate to you. Like by the time that you're finishing the trail, there's maybe 2 or 3 people finishing per day, probably less than that, maybe like a handful of people per week. So like if you want the social aspect, it's kind of just the luck of the draw as to who's around you. Whereas going northbound, like, they limit 50 people per day. Like I haven't experienced it, but I've heard that the campsites can get pretty crazy, especially in the first couple weeks of the trail. But I think one really interesting aspect about the social culture, which kind of goes back to what Chaunce was saying, and I didn't experience this has just been my observation and doing what I do with the trek, but the AT seems more naturally a social experience, just the way the trail is constructed. Having the shelters are really good social bonding opportunities. You have hostels on the AT where you can go and get a bed in a room with 8 beds and you're just around other people. the PCT obviously is very busy early on, but it doesn't seem like there's the infrastructure for like the common hangout areas to the extent that it exists on the AT. Like you don't have shelters, you don't have hostels the same way. So yeah, it just seems like groups form earlier on because people are eager to make those connections, but it doesn't necessarily have the same infrastructure to lend that experience throughout the entire trail. Do you guys agree with that?
Yeah.
I think the biggest bonding experience was the fires on the PCT. It was like the AT has like hostels and shelters and all of those things that are very conducive to like social bonding. And the PCT has fires.
Yeah.
I think
and you don't mean campfires.
No, that's
mean,
so true. Like you have like the social bonding moments on the AT are like happily driven. And I think the things that drive bonding on the PCT are like unhappy, fear-based, like strategy type of stuff.
Okay, we're back. Let's go into, maybe this will be very quick. I think it is relatively for me, but let's talk about the primary gear differences. Let you start, Spring.
I had a ton of gear differences. I basically changed my entire setup between the AT and the PCT. I don't know if the trails really you need that much of gear differences. I mean, I guess in the desert you're gonna want like more sun protection and stuff like that. But overall, I feel like you can use the same setup. When I started the AT, I used the gear that I had been using since I had started backpacking, and so it was very heavy. It was pretty much, I would say, like the heaviest setup that you could have. When I started, my backpack was around 45 pounds, and it didn't really get that much lighter throughout the trail. Like maybe a couple pounds lighter when I got rid of some clothing items, and I switched from a 0-degree bag to a 30-degree bag halfway through once it got warmer out. But yeah, I carried everything else was super heavy the entire time. And then once I realized that there was such thing as ultralight gear, after I had finished the AT, I spent the next couple of years investing in buying a lighter weight setup. And when I started the PCT, my base weight, I think, was around 15 pounds, which was a lot more comfortable. And I could definitely tell that my body appreciated having a lighter setup. I didn't have any injuries or anything on the PCT, whereas on the AT, I had some IT band issues for hundreds of miles, which now I think is just due to carrying a heavy backpack.
Yeah. I also wonder if any of that is just the trail being more difficult. I don't know how to isolate those variables because I had a similar experience to you, but yeah, the PCT's, the grade of the trail is so much easier. Like when you're utilizing your muscles in such a much more intense way, I feel like that lends itself to injury. But yeah, certainly shaving 20 pounds off your pack weight can only help.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, pretty much the only like differences I think you need between the two trails are just depending on what section of the PCT you're on. So of course in the Sierra, carrying the bear canister, and then if there's snow, ice axe and spikes. I also carried crampons with me. I had both the spikes and the crampons. But other than that, yeah.
You had both spikes and crampons. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Were you using both?
Yeah. Everyone who I was hiking with, I entered with 7 people, and then we went through in a group of 5, and everyone I was with had both spikes and crampons. The only place that I think we really needed the crampons was on Mather Pass. You probably could have done it with just spikes, but I think it would have been pretty sketchy. There wasn't any footprints on Mather Pass when we went up it, and so we ended up traversing the right side of the pass. And for me, that was terrifying. I have a very low risk tolerance, and so I did not enjoy a lot of the Sierras, honestly, because I was so scared the entire time. And so, yeah, that was the only time when I think the crampons were really necessary, but I did use them a couple of other times when other people just use spikes it was just to make me like feel better about the possibility of probably not dying.
Do you know how many people went through the Sierra? PCT hikers went through the Sierra prior to you?
I'm not sure. I think the first group that entered was maybe like 2 weeks ahead of me. I entered on May 12th. So I don't think there was that many people ahead of me. Definitely not more than 50 people ahead of me.
Not to sidetrack us too much, but did you enjoy the Sierra? It sounds like
no.
Yeah.
I did not enjoy them. The other people around me, I enjoyed them a lot more than I did. But I think having such a low risk tolerance and not having any mountaineering experience, I was so scared every morning when I woke up that I couldn't really enjoy them that much. Yeah.
If you had to rehike the PCT, and I'm not saying like redo your experience, but like do it again in a future year, how do you think you'd go about it? Northbound later, southbound?
I think I did really like going northbound, and I think I would start later, maybe a month later. Yeah, I don't mind the heat at all, and so I think that starting towards the end of April would work totally fine for me. I just have a deadline. I have to get to school, so I didn't really have a choice about when I started.
Yeah, got it. Gear. Yeah, I guess this is less subjective. This is probably will all be lockstep with this, but just curious to get your guys' differences.
I also changed everything, though I didn't really need to. It was mainly, so I started the AT with a ULA circuit. I loved the circuit. I think they're great packs. They're really awesome, and I didn't have any problems with it. Like, it fit beautifully. It was amazing and fit everything I needed to. I just had a little bit of extra room. I had an Enlightened Equipment quilt and a Nemo Tensor Ultralight and Gossamer Gear, the one tent. And that all worked great for the AT. Like, Gossamer Gear was a little wet in the rain, I'd say, but so was any single wall tent. The Tensor definitely shit the bed in the 100-mile wilderness. That thing died and was dying since Pennsylvania on that trail. The whole valve ripped out in the 100-mile. And I know that's not just my pad, because the same thing happened to Lovechild's when we were in the wind farms on this trail. So I think after 1,000 miles, the valves just tend to kind of rip out on those. So it's not great. It doesn't happen to everyone, but I've seen it happen twice, and I don't really think that's a coincidence. For the PCT, I have a Hyperlight Unbound 40 because I didn't need the 60 liters, the ULA circuit anymore. And I have the Thermarest X-Lite, all that jazz that they say. And I like that a lot. That works great. And I've only had like one tiny hole in it so far, so I love it. And I have a same quilt, same tent. Mostly I changed a lot of it because I just got it for free. Because I started writing for doing freelance for backpacking companies, and that was really fun. And it made it more fulfilling for me to like actually be using gear that I work with the people who make it. And I'm just like, oh, cool. I'm not just carrying a Hyperlight pack. I'm like carrying the pack that Mark gave to me because I write for Mark. And I'm like, oh, this is so fun. And I also carried a bear can and an ice axe through the Sierra. And I did not have the same experience in the Sierra as you. That sounds like hell. Yeah, it was.
When did you enter the Sierra?
I was there in July. It was hell for different reasons because the mosquitoes. The mosquitoes are really bad. Not as bad as New York when the DEET went into my ass because the ass chafe. Because in New York, I chemically burned my ass chafe with 100% DEET because a thunderstorm made it all run into my ass.
Oh no.
That was really cursed, and I hiked like half naked to the shelter. That's different.
I'm glad you didn't grow a third eyeball or something.
Yeah. So that didn't happen on this trail. So I was just like, okay, the mosquitoes aren't that bad because that's my metric.
Yeah.
In my
Damn.
head, I keep being like, is Bend before or after where they get really bad?
Bend?
Yeah, because isn't there was a spot in Oregon, it was either Oregon or Washington for me, where the mosquitoes were fucking hell. And I finished the PCT on September 11th. So we're right around the time frame and we're right around the area. And I'm hearing you talk about this and I'm like, do you have a surprise coming for you further up the trail? I can't remember because I can't remember exactly where it was. But I can check.
Yeah, I think the
Thank
timing's
you.
just different every year, just based on how wet the spring was, how much snow there was.
Sure.
Yeah, I hope you're okay. I don't actually know.
Yeah.
I can't.
Yeah.
TBD.
No, it's fine. I'll get through it regardless.
Yeah.
The Sierra was fine. I used my ice axe once, and that was to glissade for fun down Forester. And to be honest, I didn't really need it if I didn't want to use it. I just was carrying it, so I was like, God damn it, I'm gonna use this thing one time.
Spring, I'm curious to know where the mosquitoes were worse for you on the PCT and compare your AT PCT mosquito experience.
Yeah, I think the mosquitoes were worst right after Shelter Cove. But honestly, they weren't that bad for me at all. I don't know if it was just because they were so overhyped. Like, everyone talks about how bad the mosquitoes are in Oregon. And then I got there, and there was only one night where it was really that bad, where I didn't even want to leave my tent to cook dinner. And on the AT, I didn't really feel like I had bad mosquitoes either. I don't know.
Are you not a mosquito person? Are they not
Yeah,
attracted
they don't
to you?
like me very
Okay.
much.
Okay.
Yeah, so
you're
I
disqualified from the conversation.
I did notice that while I was hiking and everyone else was like swatting the
Yeah.
mosquitoes, I wouldn't even have mosquitoes coming at
Yeah.
me. So yeah, I'm not sure if I can
You've got
speak
that
to this
good blood.
question.
That's a superpower.
Yeah, that is a superpower. That's a great superpower.
Okay, one thing that I will point out about gear, couple things. I think, like, same thing like we're talking about with how the logistics of the PCT are more logistic than the AT. It's the same thing with gear, because you have to consider different kits for different things. Like, for example, you're not going to carry the crampons the whole time. You're not going to carry the ice axe the whole time. There are parts of the trail that you need a bear can, and so you have to have a certain number of logistics in terms of sending yourself gear and sending back gear that you technically don't need to do on the AT. Like, you can switch to a lighter sleeping bag or a quilt if you want to on the AT, but you really don't need to switch types of gear. Whereas, like, we had people who were switching to a sturdier tent for the Sierra, or they were switching to, like, just things that they could hike through snow in. Like, they were getting waterproof socks. They were doing just different kinds of accommodations for that portion. And even in the desert, like, we got to San Jacinto and there was snow, and so we had to have our stuff sent to us, like our spikes, your ice axes. Like, they were recommending all of that for San Jacinto. And so there was a lot of more logistics when it came to, okay, where am I going to have this sent in? Where am I going to send this out? How long am I going to have to carry this? When I added my bear can, I got a different pack, because I was like, I don't have a way to comfortably carry a bear can in the pack I'm carrying with the kit that I currently have. And you hear so many people talk about, like, how horrible the stairs are on the approach trail of the AT, and like how hard it is and all this stuff. And part of it was because I was in great shape starting the AT, that I just, like, didn't notice any of that and thought it was nothing but, like, happy sunshine rainbows. But also, I had my kit tuned in by that point, right? Like, I wasn't starting the AT with a heavy pack. I was starting it with an 8-pound base weight. And the different experience that I had in the southern states of the AT compared to people I talk to when it's their first trail is night and day, because all they remember is pain and all I remember is fun. And it's because I had my gear dialed in. And I think if you're choosing which trail do I do first, like if we're going back to the theme of this, which is AT and PCT, it's easier, I think, to buy your first backpacking setup for the AT because you don't have to buy as much. So in a sense, it's almost cheaper to start with the AT because you have less gear that you have to consider and less gear that you have to buy. But yeah, I think the way you enjoy the trail, like there's definitely that pain period when you're first starting out and you don't know what gear you're carrying, that affects the start of either trail for your mindset when you're just hurting. But I do think the PCT, like not going to touch on specific pieces of gear or any of that, but I think just logistically, like having to think about where to send things and send them back from, and who's going to keep them at home or who's going to be responsible for sending them to you. That's just something you don't have to deal with on the AT. So that's a big difference that I noticed.
Yeah. Like you guys, I went from ultra heavy to ultra light, first hike to second hike. I think it's a pretty common experience. I think part of it is going into your first hike, you don't think that you don't realize how important a light pack weight is. You have to like live that experience to really know the value of having a sleeping bag that weighs less than 3 pounds or 2 pounds or whatever it might be. But yeah, instead of just comparing my gear, I guess just double down on what you guys are saying, gear-wise differences. One thing that I think I've heard talked about, I don't know how necessary it is, but if you want to get really granular with this, is because the AT is so humid, whereas the PCT is very dry. I've heard more people on the AT use synthetic insulation, primarily for a jacket. I still think for a quilt or sleeping bag, down is the way to go just because it's so much lighter and more compressible. But yeah, just having a synthetic, either mid-layer or even if you're hiking early on, puffy jacket, it'll just perform so much better in a humid environment. It'll retain its loft, whereas if it's humid all the time, your down's going to lose the insulation value. It's not going to perform as well. I think a rain gear is a much bigger consideration, generally speaking, on the AT. AT is a very wet trail. For some years on the PCT, it can be very, very wet. Other years, I think we saw 2 rainstorms my entire PCT hike. I don't think that's typical, but I think it's closer to normal than getting a super wet year on the PCT. I was advised to not bring rain pants on the AT, and based on the weather that I experienced, I thought that was not the best advice. There were a couple of days where it was raining in the mid 40s, and even though you're still going to get wet everywhere with traditional rain gear, whether you're sweating or it permeates through your rain gear, just having something that traps the heat is very beneficial. And yeah, that was the closest I've ever experienced in a backpacking sense to experiencing hypothermia. So I wish I would have had more heavy, not only the rain jacket was fine, I wish I would have had rain pants, and I'd encourage anyone hiking the AT, especially early on, to have legit rain gear. And that can mean anything. Frog togs are totally fine until they rip. But take the rain seriously, especially early on. It can get very cold. PCT is much more of a mixed bag. I'm curious, how much rain did you guys experience in the desert?
It actually rained a lot the first couple of weeks for me. Almost every single weekend there was a storm. So I think I got rained on maybe 4 or 5 days in the desert. But after that, I think it rained 3 times total for the rest of trail.
Yeah.
I started May 7th, so I didn't experience any rain in the desert. It was actually just hot and hell.
Yeah. Are you going to hike out today?
No.
Okay, you saw the forecast.
No. Well, we have to drive back in our rental car anyway.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
going back to Bend. Yeah, no. I've experienced just like a freak couple hailstorms in the Sierra, and like literally 2 other days of rain otherwise. Yeah, I mean, honestly, if I were to do this trail again, I would just do it Sobo and not do the desert at all.
Yeah, I did not enjoy the desert, and I went southbound, so you're not wrong about that. Chaunce, how much rain did you see on the PCT?
I've gotten really lucky. The PCT, I think I had 2 total days that rained, and those were the days that I stayed in my tent outside of Belden and refused to go anywhere. And then like maybe like a drizzle another day. But even the AT, like definitely less than 10 days of rain.
Which is a dry year for
maybe
the AT.
even like around 5.
Wow.
That's insane.
But I'm also like, if I'm near a town and I have to resupply and the forecast says rain tomorrow, I'm team 0. I'm like, well, that means I'm not hiking. So maybe it was timing, maybe it was the year, maybe it was just where my zeros were. I really haven't had to suffer through a lot of rain on either of these trails.
We went to the AT this year and we were there for 5 days and we saw 5 days of rain.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just like, I didn't have to do that.
Yeah. So I guess traditionally speaking, PCT can be very dry. It can be wet in the spring. But just plan on the AT being wet and maybe you'll get lucky like Chaunce did. There was another AT specific thing. Oh yeah. I think spring you mentioned it, but getting a lighter sleeping bag in the summer is an advisable thing if you've got it in the budget. Starting off with a 20-degree bag on the AT is probably about the right number, give or take, just on how hot you run. But once the overnight lows get to be, like, I think I had a few days in the AT where it was still in the 70s overnight, and like I slept like shit in that environment. And even having a lighter sleeping bag is not going to save you there, but for the most part, it's nice to have something that is not only lighter, but something that's covering you without cooking you alive. So like some sort of summer bag is good. 40 degrees. People were getting like fleece blankets from Walmart at one point. But yeah, just something to consider if you've got the budget. And PCT, it's definitely much trickier with the PCT because there's just so much variation. You can go from 100 degrees in the desert to below freezing in the Sierra in a pretty quick time span. But you mentioned spring considerations for the sun. I'm a big proponent of an umbrella, and I think that the PCT is a good setup for it. I know that was one of the items that you sent home based on the article. And I agree. I never found a good system to affix it to my pack, but I'm a ginger and I need something to protect me, and I just have not had good experiences with sun hoodies. I overheat, so having the draft that an umbrella allows is my personal preference. But whether you want a sun umbrella or not, just have some sort of plan for the sun, sunscreen, sun hoodie, big ass hat, whatever it might be. Bear canister, traction. I think that's about it. Cool. And this will be a kind of broad-based thing, but I think could yield some interesting answers here. Is just generally speaking, what were your personal highs and lows from the PCT versus the AT? And that can be landscapes, social, whatever, I guess, whatever stands out to you, just the things that you liked the most about each trail and then the things that you disliked the most about each trail.
On the AT, one of my favorite parts was Shenandoah National Park. And it was really beautiful, but I think it was my favorite because I slowed down there. I had been really pushing miles up until that point. And then I met these two girls who I ended up hiking the rest of the trail with. And they were doing a flip-flop. And so they were still hiking pretty slow because they had just started their hike. And I decided to slow down with them to hang out with them. And we were doing like 8 miles some of those days in Shenandoah. And I was really able to just, listen to the birds chirping and enjoy the views and enjoy the company of these two girls. So, yeah, Shenandoah was definitely a highlight. I think a low light on the AT was New Hampshire, which is kind of sad because I was most excited to get to New Hampshire. But when I got there, I was already so mentally tired and physically tired, and then the whites are just so difficult that I did not enjoy going through them as much as I had anticipated, even being on my home turf. So that was kind of a bummer. And then when I got to Maine, it was still difficult, which sucked. And I was pretty happy to get to Katahdin and be done. On the PCT, the views in the Sierra were amazing, especially on top of Forester Pass. But I wasn't able to enjoy a lot of those views just because I was so scared the whole time. So I think my favorite part of the PCT was probably the Goat Rocks Wilderness. All of Washington was amazing, especially since I love hiking in forest. I love the color green that the Washington forests are, and all of the Knife's Edge was insanely beautiful. And I feel like just knowing that my hike was starting to wrap up made me appreciate the beauty even more. And I camped with some southbounders after I had hiked over the Knife's Edge, and listening to their excitement about the coming trail kind of reinvigorated my excitement about being out there. And that was a really special experience to get to hike or talk with a lot of the southbounders as I hiked past them. Low light of the PCT was probably Mather Pass or Bear Creek. I almost got swept away in Bear Creek, and it was terrifying. Definitely a near-death experience. Luckily, I was with other people, and they came into the water and basically just dragged me to the shore, but my feet were not on the ground, and I would have gone very far down that river if they hadn't been there. So that was definitely a scary experience.
Yeah, holy shit.
Sorry, that was terrifying. I was just zoning out and thinking about drowning in rivers. It's like, wow, that sounds horrible. I'd say on the AT, I loved the AT. That trail is like my home trail and the love of my life. But I think the highlights of it, honestly, everything past New Hampshire. I loved the whites. They just I just really liked like the weird bouldering aspects of it when you're like looking up and you're like, holy shit, this is what I'm doing. Like, what the fuck is this? And you just have to like get up and just do it. And there's no way around it. And it's just like, I loved getting to the top of those mountains and just like heaving and just barely being able to breathe, but looking around and like seeing all of that landscape and being like, oh my God, like I just made it up here and this was incredible. And like the endorphins are just pumping and I'm just like having a dance party by myself on the top of the mountain. I'm like, this is amazing. Like, this is just what I've been hiking for the whole time. And just being surrounded by that thick undergrowth and all the moss and the wetness and the trees. That was just incredible. And also it was my birthday when I was going over Franconia Ridge. So it was just like, and I did it for sunrise and it was incredible. So I'd say that was definitely the highlight of the trail. And also just like, I have a ton of friends on the East Coast, so just being able to like stay with friend, like from my childhood to being an adult was really, really cool. And also walking through my college town. And then the low, I would say definitely the day with the mosquitoes and the DEET in my ass. That was probably the lowest moment of trail. Also because that was just like happening in New York and Connecticut. So it's like when you're kind of in a weird limbo, when you're almost done with trail, but you're not quite. And it's when you start to just be like, what am I doing out here? When you still have like a good bit of it to go, and it stops feeling like fun and it starts feeling like a job. But it was okay. It wasn't the worst and I kept going and it was fine. The PCT has not been my favorite trail. And I'd say I don't think I'd recommend doing trails back to back unless you know for sure you want to do one. Don't go into a trail with a general sense of indifference as to whether or not you want to do it.
Yeah, that's good advice. You have to be hungry to do the hike.
Yeah, I was just kind of like, I guess I'll do it. And that general indifference has lasted the whole hike. And I'm just like, well, I mean, I'm out here, but I don't like love it like I loved the AT. So it's just that sense of disconnect. And it's also the first trail I've backpacked on since like I've only ever backpacked on the AT. So now like this is the first one that I'm doing on the West Coast. And I also had never been to the West Coast before this. I'd say the low of the PCT was probably was definitely breaking up with Love Child and being like, wow, like that's a partner who I was with for over 2,000 miles now, and they're gone. And it's just like, all right, keep walking, I guess. And that's just rough to lose somebody like that. But also, we're navigating our friendship again, so I have hopes. And as far as high of the PCT, I'd say just getting to Oregon, like being in Oregon and being surrounded by trees again. I did not realize how much I centered my definition of backpacking around just existing in the woods until I got out here and I was in the desert, and I was just like, this is not the vibe. I don't really like this as much. But just being in like a dense green tunnel again, I'm just happy. I just realized I didn't really like the views. Like, I liked the views. I think they're pretty, but they don't matter to me as much as literally just walking in trees, which is funny.
I'm like writing down my thoughts because I feel like I've got so many thoughts. Highs and lows.
This isn't a Triple Crown. You don't get to take all of them.
I'm not going to take every thought. every single thought. I'm about to take it. No, there's a lot that I relate to in what you guys are saying, because like the highs and the lows, I feel like also come with the lens that you're viewing the trail through and like how it's going already, right? Like you're going to like something way more if you're having a great time, and you're not going to like love something a ton if like you're suffering through it. But I very much had first trail love with the PCT. Like that was the first one I did. And so like, I don't think if I were to do the PCT second, like I wouldn't have loved the desert. I would have hated the desert. But I loved the desert because it was me figuring out like what thru hiking is. And it was my first multi-day backpacking trip. And there were all these people out there that like were also doing the same thing, that you could hang out with, that didn't have plans the next day because this was what they were doing every day. And so there were these experiences that made certain things higher than they would be had they come in a different order. So for the PCT, I very much had like a high of it was it being that first trail and like me just thinking it was the coolest thing ever. A high of the PCT was also just the state of Washington. Like loved hiking through every resupply stretch. Was just so cool. Like each town to town section had its own cool stuff, whether it was the Goat Rocks or it was the Kendall Catwalk or just any of the stuff was incredible in Washington. And I had no interest in the AT. Like I came back and I was like, I'm never doing the AT. It's a green tunnel. I grew up in New York. I know what trees look like. I don't need to do it. No, thank you. And just like how Zach was saying, like you shouldn't do a back-to-back hike if you're not totally stoked on doing whatever the follow-up one is. I didn't do back-to-back because the next year I had no interest in doing the AT. I was like, yep, still don't care about that trail. And it wasn't until I was at a desk doing a job that I hated for a year and a half that I was like, you know what's not sounding so bad anymore is the AT. That one's sounding actually quite good, because I am just desperate to be hiking again. And I think that put me in the right mindset to do the AT. And I think I had so much fun at the beginning of the trail, and I enjoyed the southern portion of the AT so much because I was just craving being back out there again. And when I finally got out there, I was just so happy to be there. Whereas other people are just suffering through, the southern portion. So the southern portion is one of the highs for me on the AT. And then I also did no research for it because I was thinking if I didn't look into anything of this trail, then it would be more exciting because I wouldn't know what was coming. And so I didn't know we were doing McAfee Knob until the day before. And I didn't know what any of these views were supposed to look like that people were getting excited for that were supposed to come. And when I got to New England, I was just like, holy shit, like this is so freaking cool. And I had not thought it would look like this at all because I just knew about a green tunnel and didn't do any other research. And like Franconia Ridge and just everything in New England was amazing. Lows For the PCT, obviously just like mindset after having to miss the Sierra, it tanked. The fires weren't great. It's like I'm also asthmatic, so it doesn't it's not as fun. It's not as fun to hike through smoke when you can't breathe. It's not as fun to hike in general when you can't breathe. But so yeah, that was a low. And then and the AT Shenandoah was a low for me. I kind of just got bored. And it was really hot and I just didn't feel like doing it. So Shenandoah was a little bit of a slog. And then getting around where I'm from in New York was hard too, because I was slack packing that section. So I was just sleeping in my bed every night and like having my parents drop me off and pick me up. And you just get out of the mindset, you know, and you get used to the bed and it gets more comfortable. And then you're like, shit, I got to go sleep on the floor again after this. Like that was hard to refocus after. And I think what helped that was just getting enough distance where I couldn't go back and sleep that night because it was then too far. And it was like, okay, I'm back in this. But that was definitely challenging. But it's funny because like you guys talking about the AT compared to the PCT, like obviously there's that first love, trail love there. But it's funny being someone who is so not interested in the AT and who loved the PCT so much because it was my first hike. But if I do think about it opposite and I say, well, what if I wasn't so jaded against the AT and what if I had started with that trail? I don't think I would have really like loved the PCT the way I love it now, because I think all of the things that made the PCT so fun and exciting came with it being new and it being the first hike and having those first experiences and making that first trail family and doing all those first things, where if I did it after the AT, I would have hated the desert. I would have been really mad to have flipped through the Sierra. I probably would have tried to go a little further than I did before I flipped. I would have been like, what the fuck's going on when I got to the fires? I just don't think I would view it the same way if I had done the PCT second. And so I'm kind of glad to have done it first, because I think that's a lot of people's experiences when they come from the AT. At least my impression of their impression is that they like it just can't compare to the AT, and then you get the logistical issues and then it becomes kind of annoying. And then it's like, what the fuck is this? You know? And it has the great views, which it makes up for it a bit. But I do think that it's hard to love the PCT as much as when it's your first hike, when you have done something else before it and you know, face that hard times. Was that too many thoughts for you?
Yeah, too much thinking.
I'm so sorry.
I hate it when you think.
Yeah. It's hard when you have to listen to me talk for 6 years.
No comment. I'm going to go with, there's a lot I could say about the AT. I do love the AT. And I think the thing that I love the most, which I don't hear talked about all that much, is, and maybe that just depends on your start time, but watching spring unfold on the AT in the dense forest is magical. When you start and the trees are barren and it's cold and you're still getting sun through the trees, and to watch it slowly come to life, and the trees are budding and the rhododendrons are coming out. The canopy of the birds on the AT is, I know I've talked about it a lot, but like,
no, it's not that you've talked about it a lot.
I just love it so much. Like waking up to the song of birds is like truly a magical thing that I have not experienced remotely on any other trail.
So it's funny you say that, because I was thinking this the second you said the start of spring, and I wanted to bring it up, but you've just teed this up perfectly. Is I hadn't even realized that when I was hiking the trail, like you're saying, a lot of people don't. There was a moment where Zach texted me on the AT, and he was like, "Are you waking up to the sound of birds yet?" And like, I'm waking up and it's March, like there's no fucking birds out. I was like, no, like what is he talking about, sound of birds? Like this is the sound of waking up, it's silent. And then when the birds started chirping in the morning, I was like, holy shit, there's like I am waking up. Yeah, they started, and I hadn't even considered it. And I was thinking that when you said spring rolling in, and then you just brought up the birds.
Yeah, it's when we do our short hike on the AT for trail days. I've been doing that for a while now. Like that's probably the thing that I'm looking forward to the most, is just waking up to this song of birds just everywhere. It's magical. The Green Tunnel does get old for me after a while. I stop appreciating the canopy come summertime because a lot of the trail is very similar. But when it first starts off, it's excellent. I love it. My favorite thing about the PCT, this is cliche, and I know you guys have touched on it already, but just it's so beautiful. Like the views are incredible, and there's so much diversity with the views. Even though I didn't love the desert, just to have the sprawling views of the desert in contrast with going directly into the Sierra and the majesty of the Sierra. And then I enjoyed Oregon, going through the forests of Oregon, very different from everything that you've experienced prior to that. You've got the resorts, and then going into Washington. Washington is fucking incredible. Goat Rocks, everything in the North Cascades is just like, yeah. I remember Job and I were saying this when we started at Hart's Pass on the first day, just like getting dropped off there and hiking there. We both made the comments like, within the first couple of hours here is more beautiful than anything that we experienced on the AT. I know it's different for everybody. That's obviously in the eye of the beholder, but that's the way that I felt. And like, that isn't the most beautiful part of Washington, let alone the entire PCT. So it's just like, you get overwhelmed by the beauty of the PCT. It's very hard to contend with. My lows for each are on the AT. I really struggled with the heat and humidity of the summer. It's very hot on the PCT, but it's dry. And even the times where it was 100+ degrees on trail, which I had a handful of those experiences, I struggled way more on the AT. One, because you're climbing so much and I sweat. I'm a big time sweater when I'm exercising. Add in mid 90s and whatever 80% humidity, and it's just like I struggled with dehydration, hyponatremia. Like I smelled like shit. Like I was just always uncomfortable inside and outside, and yeah, the heat of the summer really fucked with me so much. My low light for the PCT, I think the fire is probably the obvious thing, but I guess more broadly speaking, I think this is maybe specific to southbounding. I wouldn't feel this way if I went northbound, but the desert was not my cup of tea. Not only the sun, I just didn't think that, like coming out of the Sierra being one of the most beautiful places I've seen in the lower 48, the desert felt incredibly lackluster to me, and everyone had hyped it up. And I think from a northbound perspective, you're starting off this new thing. Like Chaunce was saying, it's very exciting, and there were very few parts of it where I was like, this is genuinely really cool. I was ready to be done because the desert is just, I think it's the least beautiful part of the trail, at least in my perception. Chaunce added a category here. I think this is a good one to end on, is gun to your head. You can only hike one trail for the rest of your life. What are you going with?
It's not how I phrased it.
The AT, 100%.
Yeah.
Sorry, PCT.
Well, so the funny thing was before we pressed record, I think you were over there. They were sitting here and they were like, which one do you like better? And they're like, oh, for sure the AT, hands down. And you were like, I don't even like this trip.
yeah, definitely the AT. Like even when I was on the AT, like during the worst parts of it, when I was in mosquito hell or like in Maine, like just huddled in the corner of a shelter being like, I'm gonna die from hypothermia, oh my god. Like even there, like I remember consciously thinking in the 100-mile, like even though I'm about to finish this trail, I know I'll be back here again. Like I might do this again sometime in my life, probably when I'm a lot older, so it's not so new, but it's like I never have gotten that feeling on the PCT. Like, I'm not coming back here. Like, it's been, I don't regret hiking this trail. I think it's been a really awesome experience with its highs and lows. But I don't think I'll hike this one again. I also just haven't hiked Washington yet.
Yeah.
So I think that impacts it a lot because literally the whole trail I've been looking forward to Washington, and now it's like, oh, Washington's on fire.
I will say, I think I've met a ton of people on the PCT who also have hiked the AT first, and the majority of people, I think, generally like the PCT better. So I'm not sure why we both feel.
I have the opposite experience.
Really?
Yeah, a lot of people I've talked to are like, yeah, I don't want to be on this trail. And I'm like, oh.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Should run a poll amongst people who've done both. What's your preference?
I think It's hard to say because I think I do love the PCT so much, having it have been the first trail. But if you were to ask me which one I would hike again, like if I had a summer free and I was to go do something again, like I have to go do the AT again. And like, fuck, I'm doing all this like mile by mile stuff on the AT. Like, why? I keep choosing the AT. So why am I doing that? And I think a lot of my liking the PCT so much is because it's the first trail. But I think side by side, which one would I do again? Type question. It would be the AT.
I'll be the one on an island here. I would take the PCT. And I genuinely loved both experiences for very different reasons. But yeah, but just the PCT's beauty struck me very often. And I did not feel that way in the AT. I liked other aspects of the hike. But yeah, PCT is just fucking incredible. Sweet. We'll put a bow on it there. Where should people go to keep up with you guys? What do you want Backpacker Radio listeners to know?
I am on Instagram at Duck Goes Hiking.
Same. I'm also on Instagram at Abigator53, ABBIGATOR53.
We'll have this in the show notes as well. Well, both of you, thank you very much. This was a fun, engaging conversation. I wasn't sure how it was going to go, and I think it ended up being really cool to get everyone's unique perspective. So thank you for joining us here on Backpacker Radio.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Before we get to today's Trek propaganda, also want to get to the last of our rapid fire interviews, which we did at PCT Trail Days. This first one is from the Trek's social guru, James, and this is a story in which I learned the meaning of his trail name, and needless to say, Chaunce and I were both enthralled by this story. So enjoy, and this will be followed by the rest of the rapid fires.
We are joined by
James, almost famous Townsend.
I'm sure you've given me the story behind your trail name, but it's escaping me.
Yeah, I actually rarely tell the story because I always have someone else tell it, because I feel like a lot of people start to hear it like on trail or even here at Trail Days. I was talking to Liz Snorkel Thomas, and someone asked me about my trail name, and she's like, "Oh, can I tell it?" I was like, "How? I just met you. How do you know it?" So it's a little like not trail related, but it was trail adjacent to just before I hiked the Pacific Crest Trail in 2021. It's like right after 2020, everyone's trying to figure out like, where is my life going right now? Like I was working mostly like seasonally for like international trips, guiding trips for high schoolers and stuff from travel companies. And I was also looking to get back into photography, but it looked like the work season ahead wasn't going to happen. And so I was sitting in my room and thinking like, oh, I studied journalism in college. Maybe I should like switch over to like photojournalism and give that a shot. And so I was living at my parents' house at the time in Maryland, and it was like early January. I called a friend who is a journalist, and I was like, what should I do like if I want to get into photojournalism again? And she's like, just show up to like, political rallies or different events and just like see what happens. Were you there
January 6th?
Oh my gosh, yeah. So that's the punchline, really. Yeah.
Wait, is that actually you were there on January 6th?
Yeah.
And that's
So
the story?
I mean, I was living just north of Baltimore.
I pulled that out of my ass. I've never heard this story before.
I know. Yeah. That's.
Is it you with the raccoon hat?
But close. Yeah. So it was January 5th. Really, I called my friend. She said, "Go to something." I was listening to NPR. I heard there was some rally going on down in DC. It was like 1:00 in the morning, and I was like, maybe I should go to that. So I like got in my truck and I drove down, parked at the metro station, and like slept in the back of my truck, and then got up the next morning at 5 a.m., went out to the Capitol and just started taking pictures. And I was like, wow, there's a lot of people here. It's just like a normal rally. I'm just gonna take pictures of like these funny, ridiculous signs and people who are going gung ho, and then just following the crowd and taking pictures, and next thing I know,
You're
like
in Nancy Pelosi's office.
yeah, no,
I dump on her desk.
No. But actually, I did take a picture of that guy because like the guy, the Q shaman guy with the horns, like early in the day, I just like saw this weird guy, so I'll just take this guy's portrait. And then it's crazy because the aftermath was I like didn't even know what to do with this. I just started emailing some editors and didn't hear it was just like radio sound. So I'm like, I'll just put it on Instagram. And so I put it on Instagram and like went to bed, and I woke up the next morning and I looked at my story views, and it was over 1 million people had looked at my story. And I was like, what happened last night? And they had gone, people had just started sharing it. Like it was just like a on the ground. I mean, people were seeing the news obviously, but then on social media, it was just more like in between, behind the scenes, just the entire like play out of the day. Cause I was just like live posting through, just chronologically posting through it. And so, then I'm like looking at my DMs, and I have like 10,000 DMs, and I started seeing like little blue checks in there, and I was like, wait, who's this? And like, oh, it's some like CBS news anchor person and New York Times and stuff like that. And so next thing I know, I'm like dealing with the part of the business that I'd never really dealt with, which is like licensing my photography out to these news outlets and everything. So they're, I started posting them, and then next thing I know, like the next morning, like my picture and some of the video that I took like is on the front page of like the New York Times like website. And I'm like talking to my friend who's been a journalist for years, and she's just like, yeah, fuck you. Like beginner's luck. But right time, right place for the photojournalism work. But all the money that I got from licensing my photography went on to fund my hike,
Did
which
it pay
was
for your
great.
PCT
So
hike?
January 6th funded your PCT hike.
Yeah, that's a weird way to say it. Yeah.
Let's clip that for social.
So I do get. Oh my gosh, yeah. So it's funny because then when I went and hiked the PCT, there was like you're meeting hikers and they want to connect with you, and then they go on like, oh, like give me your handle, and I give it to them, and they come on. They're like, wait a second, why do I already follow you? Why does my mom follow you? Why does my? And they're like, wait a second, like you're the guy. I watched your story. Oh my gosh, like you're like almost famous. And so. Someone officially suggested Almost Famous, and I was like, I kind of want like my trail name to be something that's close, like something related to the trail, not like my life before, but it just dogged me the entire time. Like people,
it funded it, so it is related.
I guess, that's true.
And that's too good of a story to not just have at the forefront. That is so funny. I had no idea that was tied to January 6th. I thought I was being a smartass. Could you tell that there were weird vibes in the air before people were climbing fences and whatnot?
I mean, from the first like outset, I'm just seeing like there's like street preachers and like white supremacist groups and stuff like that, and just like you see like the scandalous people, and you see like the people who wore their bulletproof vests for some reason, but then you also see like families with their dogs and their kids and stuff, and you're like, oh, it's like an interesting collection of characters. And then they started like this little march, right? And I'm like somewhere in the middle, and I'm just like, people are banging drums and chanting, and then you get up to the front, and I'm just like, what do we just walk over? Oh, like barricades and like police batons on the ground, and you're like, wait, what's and you look up at the Capitol, and people are climbing the they're climbing the wall. Like I had a video, some people may have seen it. It's just like this woman who's climbing the wall, and she gets all the way to the top, slips and falls like the 15 feet off the Capitol wall, and like Jamie Foxx like reposted it with like Mario music, like game over music. Like yeah, so it's just, I mean, it was a totally bizarre time. I don't think I slept for like 3 days after, because I was like, what do I do with this? Like I'm just in my parents', like my childhood home, and I just have like this craziness going on like in my head. Even when I was heading home, my brain was just like not even processing the entire day, because I like called a friend from college. I was like, hey, like you're never gonna believe what happened in Washington today. And she's like, yeah, it's all over the news. I was like, what? Oh wait, I guess other people know about this. This is so weird. Like I was like not even, like my brain couldn't even comprehend like what it was going on. I was just like taking pictures and just in like a fever dream.
I mean, it was surreal to watch it on the news. I couldn't imagine being there. Like, that's got to be the craziest experience. So did you make it into the Capitol building?
No. I mean, I know that, like, as an independent person, like, I mean, I know there's some people who are photographers for, like, New York Times and stuff who were there in the day, and they went in and they, like, have the power of a news organization behind them. But I'm like...
You got the track, baby.
We'll get our attorneys on the matter.
Yeah. No, I mean, so I knew, like, I probably look like just, another person in this sea of white people. And so I don't even know what was going to be like. I knew my limits as far as like journalistic integrity. I was not going to break any like laws. And so I did like go right up to like where they had broken in glass and stuff. And I like took pictures and videos like through the windows, and some are kind of cool because it's just like you just see the guy in like a Guy Fawkes mask like looking back at me from a broken window. And so it was crazy.
Wow.
An incredible story.
That's probably one of the best trail name stories I've ever heard.
Yeah. Okay, let's tie in some context here. This did pay for your PCT hike. So you hiked what year?
2021.
And I know you just gave me this answer, so I know the answer, but you missed how many miles that year?
Yeah, I think it was around 370 or something like that, because when I started pretty late. I started May 4th, and I got up to Sierra City-ish, Donner Ski Ranch, I think it was. And the Dixie Fire had just broken out. And it was like, one of the biggest fires in Californian history in the past 100 years or something. And they had closed like 30 miles of trail, and it was growing. But all the people ahead of us in Sierra City were like having so much trouble hitching out of it, because Sierra City is like, 40 people, and most of them are already on their own evacuation plan. And so people were really struggling to get out of the town ahead of us. So we realized like we can't keep going even though the trail's open to Sierra City. And we're trying to think like, okay, Bernie is also like getting like the red flag warning for evacuation. Like, where are we going? And so, you start to look up the map and then realize that Dunsmuir was probably the closest place, but it meant missing most of Northern California, which was, a bummer. But I'm actually really happy to like see, especially this year, a lot more people are, being really open about like, this is a reality of the trail now. This is a reality of the PCT experience, like not really bogging themselves down with the guilt of, purism that kind of lingers over your expectations when you go into the Pacific Crest Trail. And so, yeah, it ended up being something like between 300 and 400 miles of Northern California, but it was also great to come back. I came back last year and filled it all in.
Yeah. The filling in those miles, the satisfaction of finishing that is what percentage of satisfaction that you experienced at Manning Park?
Yeah, so it's not, I find that like the satisfaction of completing something, at least with the PCT, it's not as satisfying as I thought it would be. Like, you go into a party and you mention the PCT and you hiked it, and people are like, the Pacific Coast Trail? What, like, what is this? They barely know what it is. You say you walk from Mexico to Canada. They're like, that doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. How many years did that take?
Yeah, exactly. So going back was just like, the way I look at it is like, when I left trail, I didn't feel like I had finished it. I felt like I was just like leaving home, or like leaving this place that had become home. And so coming back to it, even if it was like miles that I hadn't done, or with the goal of filling in the miles that I hadn't done, it was like returning home. And so that was like where most of the satisfaction and the joy came from, was just returning to this place that, it was very hard and it was very beautiful and has a lot of good memories, but it was also like it's like meditation. You sit down, you close your eyes, and you start taking those deep breaths, and then you get into that like place of zen and serenity, and like the world fades away. Like coming back to trail kind of feels like that meditation.
Yeah.
You run the socials for the trek.
I do. Yeah.
What's the funniest shit that someone sent?
Oh my gosh.
Are you talking about like DM or?
Yeah, in any capacity.
Okay.
I'm sure you guys probably get some rogue stuff.
Yeah, I never
want to leave
even
it open-ended.
This will be news to me too.
We get a lot of people that I think don't know what social media is yet, or something. I don't know. We just get a lot of weird things where they think like, whoever is we amplify the voices of our bloggers and share their stories, and sometimes it's their social media content or the stories that they have on the trek, and the people will respond to like our DMs as if they're talking to that blogger. And so we get like a lot of that just like confusion. But as for, gosh, I don't know if there's
like
any
trolling. Do you get any trolling?
Occasional trolling. Yeah, you get the worst. Every single niche community has like their haters. Assholes and haters and stuff, and you get the people who are like, I saw them get into a car, but and they skipped 8 miles between Tehachapi and then like they're not a real PCT hiker. I mean, I find that's mostly with AT hikers, unfortunately, but there's occasionally people who we post and someone may have some personal beef with them, but it's maybe only happened like a handful of times.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. You probably more so than anyone that I know have your finger on the pulse with like the thru hiking culture and community, just based on what you do with the social media for us, and I'm sure just in general you are very good at keeping tabs on that. I'm going to put you in an uncomfortable position here. Give me 2 people that you especially think are interesting characters to follow on social media. One non-Trek person whatsoever, and we're in a room full of Trek people, so this is an uncomfortable position. But just like
pick your favorite
yeah,
one of us.
You obviously you have to pay very close attention to the Trek people because you're posting a lot of our content as well. So one Trek person, one non-Trek person.
Wow. So non-Trek person would be a trail person, though, right?
Yeah, just anyone in the thru hiking sphere that is not affiliated with the Trek.
Gosh, I wish I remembered their name. I think it's like Miriam or something. I could look it on my phone, but they're on the Appalachian Trail right now, and like I followed them like really early on, and she's super funny, and like there's a lot of people out there, they're just doing like the daily updates and stuff like that, and for her it's just like the daily mishap. And so she's just always like, there was something, and her account is like blown up, and it's funny because she's not doing anything. She's not like, look at this view, here's my Lord Huron soundtrack behind all my videos, and like making this really beautiful thing. She's like, I decided to eat peanut butter for 3 days as my only food source, and I think I have to go to the hospital now. And she's like collapsing in a shelter, and people are feeding her like their leftover snacks, and she's like, that was a bad challenge. Like, it's just like all those silly things. Or like, she had this shirt that was just like, shredded, and that at some point it was just like a meme for her to keep on hiking with this terrible looking shirt. I think she just recently replaced it.
Horrible fashion.
Yeah, I wish I could remember her name. It's just her name on there. For someone Trek related, as a photographer, I love the photography side of things, and I love seeing how people, I mean, the PCT has like these landmarks that everyone hits and they take a picture, but they're very different experiences for everyone. That's like the nature of thru hiking. It's like everyone's doing the same trail, but everyone's having their own unique experience. And that also includes like what time of day they hit places, the way they like shoot something, the way they how they use like wildfire smoke or whatever. So Sakari McGregor, it's like I wait for his stuff because he just takes amazing photography. There are some really, I think Abby Shitwater, they have some of like just really open and vulnerable experiences, or they're very open and vulnerable with their experiences on trail. And so their blogs come in or their posts come in intermittently, but when you get into it, you're like, this is a chapter of a novel. Like it's not just like a day-to-day account, which those are fun to follow too. But I love when people dive into like the emotional side of thru hiking, and especially just the expectations versus reality of what people come into when they come into thru hiking. I think a lot of people, they lean so much on like the beautiful aspects of thru hiking, but a lot of people are going through a lot of emotional things, or they're dealing with just the pain and drudgery of the trail and processing that and discovering like in what ways those struggles can be beautiful or can be a part of this experience, like even if they're not like moments of joy, but like moments of like poignancy. And I think when people really focus on those individual things, people are really want to hear that stuff. They are really drawn to the authentic trail experience, but also like the emotional trail experience.
Yeah. It's very easy to share the highlights and seem like the hero, but to like dig into the darker aspects of this takes like a really honest and transparent person. I don't know when these rapids are going to come out. Still have to figure that part out, but we do an AT PCT panel based on your recommendation. So shout out to you again. Most of the people that we interviewed here at Trail Days were from your recommendation because you're so well plugged into this. But yeah, Shitwater will be on a future podcast or was on a past podcast, and just to corroborate everything that you said, that they're great.
Yeah.
Having frequent interactions with Zach, do you have any funny Zach stories? Don't look at him though.
Don't look at Zach.
Yeah, he's gonna try and intimidate you out of it.
Funny. I mean, it's always a joy. It's always a joy, of course. The pay is great. No, the funny things are. I mean, I think it's just the freedom that he gives me. It's where like
this can't be a compliment. This is funny Zach stories.
Oh, okay, funny
the
Zach
freedom
stories.
he gives you. Come on.
I mean,
Has he ever done anything embarrassing?
I'm not
on a
going to
phone
compliment
call?
myself. I'm going to compliment James. Is that I give James very little direction on how to handle things. We'll do like a twice per month review on how things are going, and most of the time he's just trying things that are so beyond my realm of creativity that this is all of his own invention.
I was hoping you'd like fall out of your chair during a Zoom or something. Like I'm looking for real surface
we get a
level
lot
shit.
of dog barging in.
That's
here
happened a
and
couple
there.
times. Yeah, when I work
That's
from
a
home,
joy.
which I don't recommend. Yeah, no, I can do a better job shitting on myself than James will give you.
Yeah.
James is going to sugarcoat everything. I'm just like spastic and all over the place, and
I mean, you don't have to tell me. I know.
yeah, but I think probably even worse in these contexts because what we do is that's part of the thing that we do. When I'm trying to have like a productive conversation, it's even more annoying because I can't keep on one subject without like tangenting in 14 different directions. So thank you for putting up with me. All right, rapid interviews. We are joined by
Willie.
that's trail name.
Trail name. Oh, human name is Catherine.
Catherine. Okay, so what's the fun story behind Willie?
I don't have a great story behind it. It's sort of just a personality trait thing, an amalgamation of Free Willy, Willie Nelson, Willy Wonka, just depending on the day.
Yeah.
Take your pick.
You're a big fan of Free Willy?
I'm a big fan of Free Willy.
Yeah.
I'm from the Pacific Northwest. I was a little obnoxious about water in the desert.
Yeah.
And then from there, you just kind of add to your trail name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I ask how old you are? Because
Yeah.
that was a big deal when I was growing up, Free Willy, and I feel like we must be
Oh.
similar ages if that was
I'm
instrumental.
32. I'm a
Okay.
1992.
Okay, I'm definitely
Same.
way older than you. Okay, well, I'm going to let Chaunce ask her a question because she's got hard eyes right now. and She'll
Yeah.
kill me if I do.
I overheard someone say you just got engaged.
I did. Yeah. My partner Treebeard and I are hiking the trail
pretty.
together, and he sent the ring in a resupply box, and I was like, what faith you have.
Wow.
The postal service. And carried it with him for like 1,400 miles, was just kind of waiting for what he thought was a combination of a great day, really scenic views, nobody's in a bad mood, everybody's like eaten enough, nobody's
And it took
dying.
until
and it took until Crater Lake, which
1,400 miles.
so I'm just not going to read anything into that. But yeah, it was we had to take the rim trail. I think everyone does anyway. And on the fire lookout, and it was really sweet. Some of our trail family was there, and it was kind of just perfect. And yeah.
Were you expecting it at all?
I mean, we had talked about it. We've been together a good long while. I was sort of thinking it might happen on the trail, but we're from Washington. I was thinking Bridge of the Gods maybe, or, the Terminus or something like that. I was very surprised.
Yeah. He had to pick something special, but not too special because then he'd be ready for it.
Yeah. So still the element of surprise there. It's funny. We got a video of it, and the first, it's like 7 seconds, is me being like, how? Like, what? Really? Are you? And you hear him say, like a yes would be great. It felt like an eternity to him. He's like, we can talk about the logistics later. Let's move on. But yeah, I got engaged on the trail, which
Hell
is
yeah.
super. Yeah, I'm just gonna cherish that forever. But
The yes part is funny because Garrett now in retrospect, when he thinks about the day he proposed, he's actually not sure that I ever said yes. Like he brought it up one day. He's like, I was thinking about it, and I don't think you ever actually said yes. I think you just got really excited and put the ring on.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, that's a yes.
enough.
But I don't
Yeah.
think I ever said the word. It just
No.
doesn't occur to you in your mind.
you're just like, yeah. You're like,
Just making like ee noises.
Yeah.
Looking at it.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Well, I think Garrett knows. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was very fun.
I'm assuming I was going to ask what the highlight of your hike has been.
Yeah.
Do you feel like
What
you
an-
have to say that? Is it the
Kind
answer?
of. I was just gonna say, what
probably
an
not the real
asshole would
answer.
not would say anything.
We'll say number
else.
2. What's your
Yeah.
number 2 highlight?
I mean, I loved the Sierras. Just it was the time of my life. It's so grand and expansive and awesome, and there's no one there, and it just feels unreal. And you're doing these really incredible things, and it's hard and it's tough, and but it's so rewarding. It's perfect.
Yeah.
I loved the Sierras.
Yeah.
So getting engaged with Treebeard is number 1, but the Sierras is a very close
Yeah.
second. Yeah.
Flip side, low light.
NorCal sucked. Like NorCal was really, really tough. We had a couple of rounds of heat waves that got into the triple digits. You do all this work, and you're just killing yourself, and you get through the Sierras and you're still in fucking California.
Yeah.
And there's just not really anything to look forward to. You get NorCal blues. It was really tough. I hated NorCal. I got very close to getting off trail at in Bernie. I was Googling. I was like, how to decide when to get off of trail. Like,
Yeah.
what are my pros? What are my cons? And it was just I just didn't enjoy a single thing about it. It was a total grind. Yeah.
Is it tough hiking with your romantic partner? Is he feling similarly about the experience at this point?
I'm sure he's like, please don't get off at Bernie. I really need to ask you a question. When you're hiking with a partner, the highs are really high. You get to share it with, your partner, your life partner, and it's just so much more enriched. But then the lows are really low. Mm-hmm. And I could be having a great day, and if he's having a shitty day, I'm also having a shitty day. But you have 2 minds to work on things, double the resources, but you also have double the exposure for problems. So the goods are really good, the bads are really bad. But it's just such a cool thing to do anyway, and sharing that with someone is, I mean, how many couples get to do it together and share that? It's so cool.
Yeah. Has that helped you kick the tires on whether marriage is a good idea, or how long have you guys been together prior to this?
We're coming up on 8 years.
Okay.
So we knew.
Yeah.
We had kicked tires before ever getting on the trail.
Did you learn anything new about him, or maybe vice versa? Would he say about you?
No, I mean, I think. No, we had been together for so long. This is not our first backpacking trip. It's our first thru hike. No, you just maybe you get over some of your things that would make you nervous, or you don't exactly want a romantic partner to see. You're just like, here's a wet wipe at the end of a long day, and like you're just looking at all the crevices. So no, I mean, you get a lot closer, but I don't think we really learned anything new.
Yeah.
Because the trail is not all that different from how you handle your real life stuff.
What does he do? What's one of his trail traits that drives you up the wall?
He read a book on the trail about like anthropological North American history, and he will not shut up about camels in North America like 10,000 years ago. He meets somebody new on the trail. He wants to tell them about camels. He wants to know if they know about camels. He wants to talk about where camels originated. And, it's great once, but we're hiking together. So I've heard him try to talk to people about camels 10,000 times at this point. And I'm just like, oh my God, we're talking about camels.
What are some camel facts?
I've drowned him out at this. I can't. But they originated in North America like 10,000 years ago, and he thinks that's the coolest thing he's ever heard, and it has followed me for thousands of miles. So I love him dearly. He just gave me a beautiful engagement ring and asked me to spend my life with him. He doesn't have any negative traits except for
just camels.
Loves camels.
And I was like, where did this affinity for camels come from? We've never talked about camels before, and he brings it up and you could ask anyone who's met Treebeard. Like, did Treebeard talk to you about camels? You may be entitled to compensation. Like, it's terrible. Oh my God.
Best meal that you've had on trail?
I'm a very big fan of those. The true Lyme packs that you get on an airplane a lot of the time.
No.
You can. Next time you're flying, you can get like a little Lyme satchel with whatever you're drinking. But one of those with peanut butter and ramen and some hot sauce and mashed potatoes mixed in, just like a fancy ramen bomb, is chef's kiss. It's so good.
Yeah.
I could eat that all the time. Yeah.
Best town meal?
Ooh, Julian. No, not Julian. The pie was also great in Julian.
Yeah.
Tehachapi's got this like German bakery with just these intricate pie. I can see other hikers nodding, with just like these great pies and baked food. So that was just fantastic. We did a 41-mile push into Tehachapi and then got there and just like inhaled pie like crazy. And
That's pretty early on in the hike to be pulling a 40-mile day.
Stupid too.
Yeah.
Like I don't know why. It wasn't the proper day. It was a 24-hour challenge that we just sort of found ourselves in. We're like, hey, if we push 8 more miles, that's actually a 24-hour mark, and we could do it. And it's the night you do the aqueduct walk, and there's that huge climb. It was very stupid. We're not smart hikers.
Yeah.
But we did get pie after it, which was just lovely. Yeah.
Any tips for handling the triple-digit days in NorCal?
Something that does not work is trying to hike at night, because it's then still like 80 degrees out and it's no better. And then you're afraid of cougars and it's dark and your sleep schedule is off. So a tip is to just do it during the day, and frequent breaks. Night hiking really doesn't help that much. Honestly, no, it's just one of those things on the trail that you're just like, just put your head down, get through it. The only way through is through. I suffered a lot. I don't have any helpful trip to share with anybody. If I knew them, I would use them.
Yeah.
And I didn't.
Do you recall your hottest day?
We got, I have no idea it's that river you descend down to before Quincy. And it was like 100 degrees at, 5 p.m. and we're just sitting there baking, and it's just terrible. It's so demoralizing. Yeah. Yeah. You're just,
you just feel your brain withering.
And you're 18 miles out from town, and you're just like, there's nothing here.
Yeah.
I'm literally, there's no road, there's no out. You just have to do it, and it's terrible.
Favorite piece of gear?
I have, I don't know what the brand is of my sleeping bag, but I love it very much. We have the 3-person Big Agnes. Is it Copperhead or Coppertone or Copper Top?
The Copper Spur.
Copper Spur, thank you. Tent, and for a 3-person tent, that one's phenomenal. Yeah. Yeah, it's top tier. Gives you just a little bit of extra space. It hasn't failed us. It's perfect. I have a friend hiking in one that she's got like 8,000 miles on it, and it's indestructible. Yeah. That tent is flawless. Yeah. So, yeah.
2-person would get tight for a long backpacking
trip. Yeah, and it just like a 3-person gives you another 6 inches to store your shit and a little bit of space if you need it. If you're talking about camels again. It's perfect. I would say if anyone's hiking in a duo, just carry a little bit of extra space, split it up between the packs, get a 3-person tent. Yeah.
I think it would be fun if we have you text your fiance and just be like, hey, they need one more interview, like, would you mind coming, and don't say anything else. And then we put him at the end, and we just like we just ask him like, is there anything like super interesting like you've been learning about on the trail,
like what's your,
and like not tell
takeaway?
Him that we're all just fully expecting him to like unleash camel facts onto us.
It would either be that, or he would have some really introspective, like actual quality interviewee response to it.
Yeah, and we're like still probing for camels.
I think he totally would. Like, I'll introduce him to you if you're out tonight, and he'll be like, have you heard?
Yeah, see if he's free.
Yeah. Last question.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of people listening to this. Is there anything that you feel strongly that you want to relay to the average backpacker radio listener?
Just that if anybody hasn't done it and is thinking about a thru-hiker, the PCT, more specifically, just fucking do it. It's the best thing I've ever done. It's so fantastic. There's a lot of hurdles to getting actually out on the trail, but ignore them. Just get out here. It's hands down the best experience of my life.
That's awesome.
So just do it. Yeah.
Well, you're off the hot seat. Thank
Cool.
you for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, Trek Rapid Fire number 1. Your name?
Well, my trail name is Paw Patrol.
Paw Patrol, like the show?
As the show.
Okay.
For the last 5 months, I haven't got it right. Everybody always hears Paw Patrol.
Are you a big fan?
I've never seen the show.
How did you land this trail name?
I was trying to find raccoons because I like animals, and then somebody said, "Oh, you should be Paw Patrol."
Yeah.
Still haven't seen a raccoon.
What was the method for finding them?
just looking for them. Because everybody said there's everywhere, but I did never see any of them.
Yeah, that's not on people's typical bucket list of animals they're trying to see on trail. That's like a rodent you see in town, not necessarily something in the wilderness. Why are you hiking?
I like to be outdoors a lot. I've done a lot of climbing all around the world and surf trips. And then during COVID, I was stuck in Finland, and I was kind of like doom scrolling YouTube on like treks in Nepal and everything. And then suddenly the PCT kind of popped up, and I was like, oh, that looks really nice, and let's do it.
How's the surfing in Finland?
Cold. I've only surfed in Finland once. I
Okay.
lived in Indonesia for like 6 years, so I've done a ton of surfing there.
Got it. So many directions to go. I'll let you.
You mentioned liking a part of the trail that I and a lot of other people typically dislike, which is going through burn zones. You like going through burn zones.
I wouldn't say I liked them. I was just kind of bummed out where like a lot of people that we met were kind of like skipping the Dixie burn scar. Because I found like even if it is tough going, you're basically camping in an ash tray, but you still find this beauty. There's like all these mushrooms on the burnt trees that look like little stars in the night sky, and then like a lot of wildflowers, and that brings butterflies and insects and beetles, and that brings the new birds in. And it was like, I thought there was a lot of beauty in it, like the little saplings that are coming out from the ground. Like I was kind of sometimes like, oh, ash, my feet are really dirty, but at the same time I was like, it's beautiful because there's so much life coming out.
That's a good way of looking at it.
So you just finished the trail a few days ago.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
What was your start date?
23rd of March.
23rd of March. So you did this quickly. A little under 4 months? Is that my math right?
5 months.
5 months. Okay,
Yeah.
a little under 5 months. How much of the trail did you see? I know this has been a tough year with fires.
Well, everything from the start until the Shelley fire, like in Mount Shasta in California. And then we basically saw Oregon, and then got through Washington. There was unfortunately a fire that started the day when we were in Snoqualmie. They luckily put that one out already, but we had to go from Snoqualmie all the way to Harts Pass. And apparently that's a beautiful section, so I'll have to come back to the States to do that.
Were you hiking quickly because you're a fast hiker? Are you on a timeline?
Not really. Like the only timeline I had was the 6-month visa, but I would still have a month to do it. So
Yeah. If you could go back and relive any section of trail.
Mather Pass.
Mather Pass?
Yeah.
Why?
There was no trail. It was just pure ice. The boot track was kind of gone, and just the excitement of having your crampons and just going vertical with your ice axe. It was thrilling.
You mentioned having a goal to do the AT and CDT after this and being the first Finnish Triple Crowner. Has there been no Finnish Triple Crowners yet?
Not that I know of.
No Finnish has finished.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that.
I know there's one guy who did the PCT last year, and I think he's starting to do the CDT this year in like parts.
How did this cross your radar if there's not a ton of people from Finland doing this?
So when I started like looking into the trail in 2020, I think, and I read a lot of the stuff, and it just started popping up, and then listened to a lot of podcasts, and a lot of people like who are Triple Crowners were always guests, and I like the challenge.
Sounds like you've done a lot of international travel.
Yeah.
What is the most underrated place, a place that people should know about that you visited?
Oh, that's a tough one. Some of the really small islands in Indonesia, like really hard to get to, but they're just beautiful. Like people, like when people go to Indonesia, they go to Bali, which is crowded. It's still beautiful. It's crowded, and then they have like these other islands that are super beautiful, but it's hard to get to, so people pay a lot of money to get to these places. But if you actually see a tiny little bit of effort, you can do it dead cheap. You'll travel by tiny fishermen's boats, but you'll get these pristine beaches and empty waves.
Yeah. So do you have to befriend a local fisherman, to get out there, or what's your strategy?
Well, we've done trips where we just walk to a house. I'm like, can I stay on your porch? And they're like, yeah, for $2 you can stay and you'll get some meals. And you just kind of, people are very happy there if you just go and knock. Speaking Indonesian does help, but you can still do it like if you just know the basics.
Yeah.
Smiles help, just smiles.
Would you describe yourself as someone that knows the basics, or are you fluent?
I speak pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I built a house there the year before, so when I was building my house, none of my workers actually spoke English, so it was kind of like learn to speak it or get a really bad looking wall.
Yeah. What inspired you to build a property there?
So in 2014, I was climbing a lot and I snapped my tendons on my fingers, and I was just kind of like, I have to take some time off, and I was like, okay, I'll go to Nepal, do some trekking, and went there. And then after that I was like, oh, I'll go to Indonesia, I want to kind of learn to surf. And I was there for like 2 months, and that 2 months became 9 months. And then after that I went home for a while to work for like 2 months and went back, and then suddenly I was there for like 6 years. I learned to surf though, not in 2 months, but
Yeah. What is it about Indonesia? You mentioned the beauty of the remote islands, but what was it that drew you there?
just the warm water. And I had visited before, like just for a few weeks, so I knew someone there, like a local guy who's actually one of my best friends these days, and we're neighbors. And
How does the PCT compare to the other international treks that you've done? You mentioned Nepal.
it's harder. It's way harder. Like walking in Nepal is actually super easy. Like I've done 2 trips there. I've never had a porter or a Sherpa to carry my own stuff, and I've carried like my own pack there, but like it's a good trail. It's very well maintained. You don't have to carry food. You don't have to carry a tent because there's like always a tea house where you can stay. So basically you wake up, you get breakfast, walk for 2 hours, get lunch, and you don't do really long mileage because of the altitude. You just can't go further some days.
In terms of the trail being difficult, if you were to pick a resupply stretch, so like from this town to this town, which resupply stretch for you was the most difficult of this hike?
Well, I'd say for us, or for me, it was probably the first stretch from the Sierra, from like Kennedy Meadows South to Lone Pine through Kearsarge Pass, because we did it so early in the season. It took us 10 days because there was a ton of snow, and that was just hard. But as an international, I think sometimes like trying to figure out where to mail boxes was kind of hard. But like luckily we met some good people who helped us out, and they already had a strategy to do it. So we didn't get off trail in Oregon at all or Washington, so we just sent boxes.
As someone who's hiking, who comes from an international country, I don't know if that sentence made sense, you get the point. What was something that you wish you knew before starting the PCT that would have made it maybe less daunting or made things easier for you if you had known it before going in?
That you can't order shoes from REI to post offices. They have to fix that.
You can't do that?
I don't think, everybody was saying you can't do it because they don't take that kind of, I don't know what they use, maybe UPS, that you can't do it. Like I think sending boxes was the hardest. And then the other one would be probably the basic one, how much do you tip?
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. How much do you tip in Finland?
None.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 20% is a pretty daunting amount.
Yeah, and it's not even like, it's not daunting as like if I get good service, I'll gladly give a tip. I'll give a tip in Finland as well because I work in the hospitality business myself. And but just how much, because somebody's like, well, 10%, 15, 20, like how much is it?
Yeah.
So it was a bit confusing.
Yeah. I feel that going internationally too, is I feel like I'm always tipping too much because I'm just used to the American standards, and yeah, it's tough to unlearn your old habits.
Yeah, well, it gets worse with the screens where it's like everything has a guest-facing display, and every guest-facing display is asking you questions. Okay, interesting.
What's the best meal that you had on the PCT?
Ooh, had a few. I had really good trail magic after Tehachapi. Like I got a text from one of the members of my family that like somebody's making tacos on the road, and I actually ran about 2 miles down this hill, just sprinting to get to this food. And it was amazing. And the other one would be, there's a restaurant in Sierra City with a pond that has trout, and they just get a fresh trout and serve that. So that was.
Do you remember this restaurant?
I didn't spend too much time in Sierra City. Like, even working at the camp, we would go to Downeyville or we'd go to Truckee. But is that I feel like they had like a Shangri-La type place in Sierra City. There was some place that looked like very, I don't even know the word to describe it. It looked kind of like a spa, out of place.
Yeah.
And I'm
I only
wondering
saw
if
the
it was
general
that
store.
spot.
That's the only place that I remember.
No, like Sierra City's so funny because we always drove past. Like, we never stopped and stayed. It was always just on the way to Downeyville. Did you have any fun animal encounters?
Yeah, actually, just after South Lake Tahoe. So we were cowboy camping. It was me, Monochrome, and Spring. And everybody's sleeping side by side and pretty tired. And about 10 o'clock, Spring kind of gets up and goes, "Guys, there's something right next to us, like super close." And then we all stand up, and there's a bear in a tree about 10 feet away. And it stayed around for a long time, and I let the girls sleep, and I kind of stood guard until 3 a.m. because I could hear it shuffling around. And after 3 a.m., I was like, "Oh, I don't care anymore. If it can come, I don't care. I'm so tired. We're going to do 30 miles tomorrow. I need at least 2 hours of sleep."
Yeah. Favorite piece of gear?
I really like my puffy for making coffee in the morning. I didn't really have that much clothing because I don't really get super cold, but in the mornings I have my puffy. But also one piece of gear, or I bought 2 pieces of gear on the trail that I really like. One was the coupling for the Sawyer, so I didn't have to squeeze anymore. I could just hang it, and then a pump from my pad, so I don't have to blow it up.
How much does the pump weigh?
I'd say it's about, well, how much is like 40 grams? It's like probably nothing. It's very light. And you don't have to blow your pad up in the Sierra, so it's worth it.
About 1.5 ounces.
What was your scariest moment on trail?
We've talked about this with Spring and Chrome a lot, and there's been some exciting moments, like a few river crossings in the Sierra. Like, I'm pretty tall, so that was okay for me, but I had to help them a bit out sometimes. But I think the scariest one was just before Donahue Pass. So we were post holding the whole day, and we went over the stream, and there was a snow bridge, and the girls went first, and then I came. And I think under the snow bridge there was an actual like rock bridge, and I missed it. And I went through, and my leg caught on the rocks, and my knee stopped the fall, and I thought I broke my knee. And I was just like cursing and like laying down there, like still kind of half in the river. And I thought, that's my trip there, like it's done. And that was like terrifying to think.
Were you bleeding?
No. Just very sore,
Just
bruise.
a blunt trauma to the knee. Yeah. And we'll end with this one. Anything that you want listeners of Backpacker Radio to hear, a story, a mantra, whatever it is. Here's the red carpet.
Mantra for us was smiles over miles. So if you just don't feel like walking 30 miles every day, you don't have to. And like, don't try to stress about everything, and stop reading far out comments. Because people fearmonger so much. We stopped in the Sierras, just don't read them anymore because it was just too much.
That's good advice.
Instagram, where people can follow you?
It's Zachary McGregor, so SAKARI MCGREGOR.
And same on the Trek. If you want to follow his updates, you were posting regularly. You definitely were dedicated to the blogging cause. It looks like you had at least one every couple of weeks, which I know when you're in the midst of a thru hike, especially going at the pace that you were going, is commitment.
Yeah, it was actually really fun to write, and I hope to do more. Even if I just posted my last post from the trail, but I kind of want to do a follow-up how it is going to go back to normal life, and I want to do a gear post and hopefully do more riding, and if I do more trails, hopefully ride again.
Yeah.
I have one more question, which is, when you get back to Finland, what is the first meal you're having?
It's probably gonna be rye bread with smoked salmon,
Okay.
like really dark rye bread. That's something we craved a lot on the trail, and luckily we had a friend who actually came and hiked for us with a week and brought some. So,
Did you get to the Stehekin bakery?
Stehekin was under evacuation, so
I know that fire was right outside
yeah,
of town.
never
there.
got there.
Shit. All right.
Something to come back for.
Yeah.
Great bread.
Well, Zachary, thank you so much for joining us here
Thank
on
you for
Backpacker
having
Radio.
me.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Okay, to the Trek propaganda portion of today's show. This one is not backpacking specific, but if you've listened to this podcast, you know that it's very relevant and near and dear to the hearts of myself and Chaunce, probably more so me than Chaunce. But the title is Lyme Disease Vaccine Passes Stage 3 Trials. Woo. By Kimberly Featherston. I will just give you the synopsis here. Lyme disease vaccine developed by Pfizer and Valneva SE has successfully completed phase 3 trials and could be available by 2026. The vaccine, VLA15, is a 3-shot series followed by a booster and is designed to prevent Lyme disease transmission from infected ticks. The trial involved participants age 5 and older who are regularly exposed to tick-prone areas. No safety issues have been observed thus far. The vaccine could significantly benefit thru-hikers, especially on the AT where Lyme disease is a growing concern. This is awesome news for me because I would be reluctant to spend much time in the mid-Atlantic region, although I guess we are in New York right now, without at least being highly suspicious, nervous, on edge the entire time because of ticks and Lyme disease, which is a real certified motherfucker. You have anything you want to add to that?
Seems cool to me.
Good. We did post this one through the Trek's Instagram, and boy, there's a lot of conspiracy theorists out there.
Because it's a vaccine.
The anti-vax people were very loud. I haven't looked into any of this, so for all I know, it could be true, but a lot of people are saying it's created by Lyme disease was created by the government.
Really?
I don't know.
Oh, I love conspiracy theories.
Yeah, I shouldn't poo-poo it because I literally have not looked into it at all. And, sometimes the conspiracy theory ends up being the true thing, but...
You'd think they would find, like, a bug that would bite you more commonly, though. Or, like, they would target an area of the country that's not where they live. Like, if it was made by the government, wouldn't, like, Cap Hill be saying, like, let's put it in some animal that's only out in California?
I think it could be one of those things. Now we're just speculating on conspiracy theories. This is fun. It could be one of those things where it's created in a lab and then gets out and creates a really big issue.
Like what happened that one time?
One thing that you might be thinking about.
Yeah.
Maybe that is what happened. I don't know. I should look into this one because I have no knowledge of...
We can make our own conspiracy theory that it was made by vegetarians. It's because they don't want people eating red meat.
That's the alpha-gal disease, which is different, but also could be government created.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think they don't want people eating meat, so that'd be a good one. Too many cow farts. All right. Today's question of the day. If you could trade bodies with someone for a day, who would it be and what would you do first?
This is such an easy one for me.
Yeah?
Any man. Anyone with a penis. And the first thing I would do is just flop it out and play with it.
Would you pick a man? Just any man? Like you'd walk down the street and be like, that man.
It would have to be a man with a penis.
Yeah. Okay.
I would just want someone with a good old penis. And
that's what I'm trying to get at is like
make me the strongest, most hot man. Fine.
Yeah.
That way I can look in the mirror and be like, oh, goddamn.
Like you could pick John Hamm, who's notoriously very well endowed.
I don't know who that is, but I'll take it.
John Hamm is?
I'll take it.
Mad Men. I've been in a ton of everything.
Sure. He's got a big penis?
Massive hog.
Okay, I'll take it.
You don't know about John Hamm's hog?
Flop it out on the table.
You don't know about John Hamm's hog?
No. But
I'm disappointed.
It's about to be my hog.
For a day, yeah.
Yeah, so that's what I would do. I'd play with it for the whole day.
I was on the fence between saying Sydney Sweeney and just playing with my cans all day. So
you're the same as me.
One track mind. I'll swerve. I would also choose a man for not the same reason. I would be Anthony Edwards of the Minnesota Timberwolves. Just an absolute freak of an athlete, and the first thing I would do is dunk, like just do the craziest dunk of all time.
So boring. If you were Sydney Sweeney, would you play with your boobs? Well, actually, let's not Sydney Sweeney.
Here's the thing:
if you were any woman, would you play with your boobs first or your vag first?
I would be curious to know what that clit sensation is like. That would be pretty interesting for sure. But I mean, I've felt boobs. I haven't felt her boobs.
Surely you felt a vagina before too, though.
I've felt, from my
Three
perspective,
kids.
I felt a vagina.
Ver-
Felt one of them Virginias.
I know what those are. I've seen one before.
But I obviously don't know the sensation of what the woman is experiencing from that perspective. I'm sure it's very fun. I also would imagine that it's similar to what a guy experiences on the opposite side, but whatever. But I've never experienced dunking other than like on a 6-foot rim, which
Yeah.
means you're subtracting out the jumping part, which is kind of the cool part of a dunk.
Well, what if you were in his body with none of his skills? Because it was just you in his body.
I don't think that's how it works. I think if I'm in his body, I have his musculature. That means I can jump like a freak.
Okay. Sure.
So you're picturing just like a skin suit?
Yeah,
like
you're
somebody-
trading bodies. I'm like taking off my shirt and giving it to you. You're taking off your shirt and giving it to me.
Yeah, and if I have the body, I have the muscles.
Right. But like maybe not the technique or the skill.
I don't think he has to like think or practice jumping. I think he just jumps really high naturally.
Okay.
Yeah. Fun. Triple Crown. Are we doing this? I guess we're doing this. This is already a long episode, so we'll do this
Sure.
somewhat quickly. This Triple Crown of streaming services.
But this will go fast. Thank God there's only 2 of us.
Yeah.
Hulu. It's got all the housewives. Actually, I take that back. Oh, I can't take it back now.
Yeah.
Hulu. It's got some good shows.
Are you doing Hulu Live or just regular Hulu?
The top, whatever the top Hulu is. The best.
Because
The
there's
best of
one
the
that's
Hulu.
like a cable service, and then there's one that has a lot of the network channels.
The one that has both.
Okay. Do you have the live one?
I used other people's passwords for everything. I don't actually have a single streaming service myself
Where do you go to watch live television?
on my TV. I tell Garrett to put it on for me.
Okay, so you don't know is the answer.
Well, no, because I watch The Housewives on Hulu, and that's when they come out. So I'm sure that it has live TV.
Okay. That was probably going to be my one, too. I will go with... boring, but I'm going to take it. Netflix.
Doesn't really have that great shows.
Agree to disagree, because we recently got Max. I got Max solely for Hard Knocks. The Bears are featured on Hard Knocks this year. There was no way I was missing it. And Jen and I recently had a night where my mom took Leo, so we were able to watch TV much earlier than we normally would. We're like, let's watch a movie. We went through Max, couldn't find one thing that we both agreed on.
Yeah.
And then like immediately went to Netflix, and I'd never heard of it, but it was one of like the top 10 movies. It was Lucky Logan.
Never heard of it.
Quickly looked it up on Flickster, and it had like 92% on Rotten Tomatoes. Turned it on. It was fucking awesome. It was really funny and entertaining. And I feel like I have that experience more often on Netflix than the other streaming services.
Yeah, HBO for me is just like Game of Thrones. That is.
Yeah, it's their flagship series are basically at the movie options. I didn't think were very good.
Yeah.
Okay. And these other services are now doing like 2 tiers where one is with ads. So you're paying $10 a month and then you're still getting served ads on top of that. Fuck off with that noise. I know you pay more with Netflix, but at least I don't have to pick between an ad and an ad-free option.
That's how my Hulu is with The Housewives. When they come out, I have to watch the ads and I can't fast forward through them.
Yeah. I can't wait for this segment to be interrupted by an ad.
Yeah.
But you guys aren't paying for it, so.
True.
Beggars can't be choosers. My next one is, I'm going to swerve a bit. I'm going to go with Spotify.
Does that count?
Yeah.
Okay, that's
Streaming-
creative.
Streaming music.
Yeah.
In addition to streaming music, they now have audiobooks, podcasts. Please leave us a rating on Spotify.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just like all the music that's ever, not literally all, but for all intents and purposes, all the music that's ever been made. It's great. It's the best.
So does that mean that I could do Audible as mine because that's a audiobook streaming service?
Sure. It's basically like Spotify minus the music.
And like, yeah, I guess I get a credit every month for my monthly subscription.
Spotify does limit how much you can listen. I forget what it is, like 20 hours per month, but
What?
yeah, most months I don't hit that.
Wow. What happens when you're hiking and listening?
think you have to download it in advance. I forget. I haven't actually tested it yet.
Weird. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll go with Audible. Currently listening to audiobooks on it, and it's probably my most used streaming service if we're going to count that. So here we go. I just started Queen of Shadows. Another one of my fairy books.
It sounded like a Game of Thrones thing, but yeah, no, you're smut porn.
Yeah, it's.
I think we're going to do a Patreon related to this at some point.
You want to?
Get your gals on, and you guys can try to explain it to me.
Oh, okay. I can certainly look into that.
I think like a dumbed down version of what you guys are so excited
I could
about.
just play you chapter 54 and chapter 55
I want the.
of.
I want you guys to paraphrase what's happening.
Okay.
You gals.
Okay.
Obviously. You got one more?
Peacock, because things that are on Hulu seem to also be on Peacock, but either sooner or more of it. Like the Housewives, they're all on Peacock now, and like so are their like Ultimate Girls trips, but I don't think all of them are on Hulu. So I think that Bravo is putting a lot of things onto Peacock.
This is very housewife centric, I'm noticing.
Well, yeah, I don't watch a lot of stuff. I watch Love Island and I watch Love is Blind. I watch like those shows,
Yeah.
and they are on Hulu and Peacock.
The only appointment TV that Jenna has is still like Bachelor, Bachelorette stuff.
Yeah. Garrett really likes Love Island, which is shocking. So he keeps us on schedule with it because he wants to like get through the seasons, and there's
Sure.
so many episodes.
Yeah.
So that usually lasts a pretty long while.
I was definitely into Love is Blind for a minute. I forget which season, 2 or 3. And then I tried to get back in with the following season. It wasn't there for me.
You will get back in because one of the next ones to come out is Denver.
I don't think I care enough about that. Like, it'd be like, oh, sweet, there's Little Man's ice cream. But beyond that, I don't know.
All right, well.
Unless it's somebody I know.
You're boring.
Yeah. My last one, torn between a couple. I think this is one that's slept on a little bit too much. I'm going to go with Apple TV. Ted Lasso, obviously, is great. But every time I turn on a new series there, it's like I'm always surprised it's better than I'm expecting, especially relative to the attention that it gets. Like HBO shows, obviously Game of Thrones, Sopranos, The Wire, like you can go on forever. But HBO stuff is Severance. I watched a few episodes of. Has been really good. I know people shit on the movie, but what's the Napoleon movie? I don't.
Wait, are you saying HBO?
No, Apple.
Oh, okay. I was like, I thought you just shit on Max.
I was torn between those two because I think those are the best options remaining.
Got it.
But yeah, Apple's got some good stuff.
Okay.
Ted Lasso.
Yeah, Ted Lasso's on that.
By
Yeah.
itself is worth
Great.
it. They just renewed for a new season.
I saw that
Yeah.
after they said they wouldn't, and I was really upset about that.
Yeah.
Way to toy with my emotions.
Yeah. So let us know what we forgot. I was gonna work in NFL Sunday Ticket.
Honorable mention.
'Tis the season for sure.
Happy first day of football to all who are in real time with
Yeah.
us.
Yeah, which is nobody. It's just us.
Yeah.
Mailbag.
Okay. Good morning. I apologize for being delayed on these questions, but I am a bit behind on listening. It's 4:30 a.m. and I can't sleep, so I'm pondering a few logistics of Chaunce pooping in a mountain house bag on the Foothills Trail and would appreciate some clarification. Sure. 1. What would you have hit if you missed? Were you over your quilt? Did you step into the vestibule? What were the stakes?
That's a great question.
Yeah, not over my quilt. I'm not a psychopath. It
It's
was
still inside your tent.
Yeah. It wasn't over anything. It was just over bare tent bottom. That way, if I were to miss, and like you got to think, poop comes one way out of your butt. You know, like it's gonna come out that way and it's gonna go down. So if I can feel the sides of the bag on either cheek, I know it's gonna go between the cheek, touching the bag spot. You know,
Poop can definitely go in a lot of different
it's not going to
directions.
just rocket ship out a different direction.
Well,
But
you can
had
do
I
that in my
missed,
butt.
it would have been over nothing but the bottom of my tent, and I would have probably sacrificed a sock to clean it up and like went about my day. It's less hard than you think. It's not too hard. Number 2, where did you put it to pack it out / what was at risk if it spilled? Okay. I put it in my trash Ziploc. I've got a freezer gallon size bag Ziploc that I put my trash
So you
into.
have to smash it down to get it to fold into there?
Well, it's not that big. It fit in it.
Okay. It's those dehydrated meal bags are large Ziplocs in themselves. So
Yeah, you squeeze the air out.
you're smashing it a little bit. Pancaking it.
Yeah, I was a little pancake. What was at risk if it spilled? There's no way I was going to tip it over. Nothing was at risk. It was not going to spill. And 3, most important, I don't know about you guys, but every time I poop, I pee at least a little bit too. With a penis, it seems like it would be challenging enough to not make a mess aiming both poop and pee. But without a penis, this seems like an absolute shit show. How did you navigate this situation?
This is an all-time email, by the way.
Yeah,
Eric
this is
has put a lot of thought into
Thanks,
this.
Eric. The holes are close enough where they land in pretty similar spots.
Did you miss it all?
No.
You sure?
It was a clean thing. I've been peeing in Gatorade bottles since I started living out of cars.
Yeah, but you haven't been peeing and shitting simultaneously into Gatorade bottles.
No, but no one just pees and shit simultaneously uncontrollably and is like, oh, I can't make it stop. You know, like if you pee first.
I think that's a good question of the day.
You can't poop without peeing too?
If I tried to stop the pee, I think I could. I don't know. I've never actually been in the situation. But yeah, the pee comes out when you poo.
No, I rarely ever pee while I poo.
Either I know nothing about women's biology, anatomy, or guys and girls might be different because guys always pee when they poo, or at least this guy does.
Every time the poo comes out, the pee comes out with it.
Fact, yeah.
No, that's not true.
It is true.
That's not true.
For guys, it's true.
That's not true. There are times I've had full-on poos, and there's never been any pee in the mix.
You missed the first part of that statement. For dudes, at least for this dude, that is true.
I know, but
based on this email from Eric, I'm gathering that that's also true.
I don't believe that for a second. That guys cannot poop without also peeing.
Yeah, I think that's a real thing.
That's not true.
100%
That's
of the time.
not true.
It is true.
No, it's not true.
It is definitely true.
No, it's not.
It's 100% fact.
I don't know how to verify this, but that's not true. You can poop without peeing.
No.
Yes, Zach, you can.
It's not possible.
Yes, you can.
It's once the valve gets open, everything just comes out. Poo and pee.
You have separate valves. They're different holes.
No, it's all one area.
No, Garrett.
The poo and the pee.
I almost said no, Garrett. No, Zach.
There's one tube at the top.
Oh my god.
And then like the valve gets open, and then
this is just you fucking with me. This isn't actually something you believe.
No, but you always pee and poo at the same time.
No, you don't.
Yeah, you do.
No, you do not.
100% of the time.
No, you don't.
Ask Garrett.
Like if I go to poo and I'm in a regular setting,
Maybe girls are built differently.
I sit down. What happens is I sit down on the toilet, and if I feel like I have to pee, I'll pee first. And then when I'm done peeing, then I'll decide, okay, now it's time to squeeze the butt muscles.
Definitely not that way for guys.
No.
Yeah.
No.
It's 100% of the time pee and poo come out.
No.
Not necessarily the exact same time, but it's a little tomato action. Not the right analogy, but...
I don't believe that.
It's a fact.
I don't think so.
Ask Garrett.
I don't think so.
100%.
I'm going to send him a text.
Yeah.
Can you poop without peeing?
So you didn't pee in your tent while pooping?
I thought he meant like if I accidentally squeezed out a little, I'd be like, it would probably land in the same place. No. Yeah. So can you poop without peeing, or do they both happen at the same time every time?
Again, not exactly.
No, I said, can you poop without peeing? He said yes.
Maybe he's just special then.
Maybe you need to see a doctor.
Hey, Eric and I are on the same page here.
I don't know if Eric is on the same page as you. I think he's just wondering in this instance.
I suspect that maybe Garrett's dehydrated, which is why he's not peeing when he poops.
But usually pee comes whenever you poop. At the same time? Question mark?
They're not the exact same time.
But I don't need to pee when I poop.
Yeah. So
you just said you did.
No, he's saying you do pee when you poop, but you don't necessarily have the sensation of having to pee prior to pooping.
Can you poop without peeing?
There you go.
I thought that was what my first question was. That is my first question. Can you poop without peeing? I just went in a circle.
Oh.
I just said, can you poop without peeing? Yes. Or do they both have to be at the same time? But usually pee comes whenever you poop. At the same time, but I don't need to pee when I poop. Can you poop without peeing? This is a stupid conversation.
Well, I'm glad that everyone gets to be a part of it.
Oh my God. I love that he doesn't ask why.
Yeah.
Okay.
5-star review. This is from I'm the Coolest, day hiker with FOMO. To start, to be honest, I'm a sticker freak and really would love one, but thanks for always entertaining me as I'm on the road a bunch for work and can always tune in and catch up with the new adventures. My wife and I are only day hikers. Don't do that. You are day hikers, not only day hikers in the Midwest, but I personally have aspirations of building my way up to a thru hike. Please keep up the great work. And again, appreciate the info and entertainment. Cheers, Nits. Thank you, Nits. I'm hoping and assuming we've already got you a sticker. But yeah, if you guys want to hear your reviews read on this podcast, head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave us any number of stars, just not 1, 2, 3, or 4. And as he was alluding to, I'm assuming it's a he. Yeah, he said him and his wife. Send us a screenshot of your review. Email us at podcast@thetrek.co, and we will mail you a sticker.
Cool.
Thank you to today's title sponsor, that is Topo Athletic. If you use our code TheTrek15, you'll get a 15% discount. This is an awesome deal. Honestly, Topo is definitely on the come up within the thru hiking worlds. Like another popular brand that is often referenced, but much more durable. I'm not going to name names. You might know who I'm talking about. But the shoes are built with gait mechanics in mind. They are either minimal or zero drop. They have a wide toe box to allow your toes to fully splay. They are very durable. One of our gear testers cited getting 1,000 miles out of their Topos before needing to replace theirs. Their outsoles, one of them uses, I think it's the Pursuit 2s, use the Vibram Megasole Outgrip, I believe is what the exact terminology.
Is it called Vibram? I thought it was Vibram.
I think the correct pronunciation is Vibram. I always say Vibram as well. So tomato, tomato. That's the right use of that. Yeah, these are awesome shoes. Use our code TheTrek15 to score a 15% discount. Good for only full-priced items. And like I said, this deal's only going to be good for a very limited time. Definitely don't sleep on this. Super big thank you to our Chuck Norris Award winners on Patreon. This is going to be out of order, so be prepared. Sawyer Products, Christopher Marshburn, Austin McDaniel, Andrew, Brad and Blair from 13 Adventures, Brent Stenberg, Patrick C. and Cialo, Greg McDaniel, Tracy Trigger,
Fawns.
Liz Sigger, Spam.
Wait, no. Why is it like this? Fawns.
Yeah.
Why is it like that? I don't like that.
Chaunce, got to roll with the times.
Who did this? Was this Rachel?
No, this was me.
Why did you
I think this one sorted by longevity of support because I had to grab the new names.
ruin everything in the process?
Yeah. Liz Seeger, Spam, Timothy Hahn,
Solo.
Alex and Misty with Navigators Crafting, Derek Cook, Eric Casper,
The Friendly Ghost.
Coach from Marion Outdoors, Eric Hoffman.
Wait, I didn't even tell Austin McDaniel to bring honor to his name. May he bring honor to his name.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Okay.
You ruined the whole thing.
You ruined it.
Eric-
You changed the order.
Eric Hoffman, Brian Alsop,
Fables.
Following Water, Ohio, Rebecca Brave. Is that a new one? That sounds like a
That's
new
a
one.
new one.
Do you have something cool for that?
No, I'm in shock. I'm confused. I
Brave.
feel uneasy.
Braveheart, Atlanta Braves. We'll come up with something. Griffin Haywood, You Bring Me a Beer. Jillian Daniels, Haley Buckingham,
Palace.
Greg Knight, and Ben Love.
You too. Is that for me?
That was...
You wanted to do it? You
can
do it.
No, it sounds better for coming from you. Follow us on social. That feels really weird.
I
This
didn't
is
like that at
the first
all.
time we've ever done this podcast.
I didn't like that at all.
Follow us on social media at Backpacker Radio on Instagram and TikTok at Backpacker Pod on X, Facebook.com/Backpacker Radio. You can follow Chaunce.
You can find me on Instagram at Juliana_Chauncey, on YouTube at Juliana Chauncey, and you can get my book Hiking from Home, a long distance hiking guide for family and friends, on Amazon.
Appalachian Trails and Pacific Crest Trails are my books. Leave us a review on Amazon if you would.
Please.
Follow us on YouTube.
Hi,
Check
Internet.
YouTube. We'll see what the video quality on this one looks like.
Yeah.
Equipment was forgotten. We're doing makeshift solutions here. And that's it for today's show. Thank you so much for listening, and happy hiking.